I've wanted to tell this story for years, and now I finally have a way to share it. This is going to be a long read, but it will tell you about the scariest experience of my life. I was 15 years old, living in a medium-sized city in North Florida. About 60,000 people, but some areas were really spread out and rural. Don't think of like New York City or anything. More like a town with a lot of houses spread out over a huge area and condensed shopping centers. I was a bit of a punk that my parents had a hard time controlling, so that meant I basically snuck out constantly and was always riding my bike around the city at all hours of the night with my friends, fighting and constantly causing trouble. For reference, I was probably 5'10", 150 pounds. My next door neighbors were my best friends. Let's call them Nick and Tim. Nick was younger than us and probably 5'5" and 140 pounds. And Tim was 5'8" and easily 210. Nick and Tim were brothers, only a year or so apart. One night, Tim had texted me around 1 a.m. asking me to ride bikes with him and his brother to his girlfriend's house so he can get lucky. I remember being hesitant because of how long the ride was going to be. I just looked it up, and it's 9.6 miles from my friend's house to her street, but Tim begged and begged for me to go until I agreed. Our city had a curfew, meaning any police in the area that saw you and assumed that you were a minor would stop you and possibly give you a ticket and bring you home. That meant we had to be careful about being seen by cars going by. Well, the bike ride to her house went by without any issues. We took our time, joked around, smoked a little pot, and generally enjoyed the ride together. We ran out of what little pot we had on the way and finally got to his girlfriend's house after what felt like an hour. Tim snuck around the back to go in, and Nick and I just sat on an electrical box and talked. Maybe 30 minutes went by and Tim triumphantly snuck out of the house bragging about his time there and says we should head out. Annoyed of how long it took and nearly sober, we both agreed. The first mile of the ride went by smoothly, but things changed. We had just passed a closed, decently sized shopping center and church. We rode by it slowly, in zero rush at all. After we passed it, it led to a long stretch of road with woods and canals on each side. 2 lanes on each side separated by palm trees and landscaping in the middle. There were sidewalks on both sides, and on the right side, another road connects to a pathway. We were riding on the right-hand sidewalk. Off in the distance, we saw a very tall, older man wearing a yellow raincoat and a large backpack. He was walking back and forth on the sidewalk under the streetlight on the corner of the parkway and the side street. We all went silent as we got closer. I don't think he could have seen or heard us, as there were no lights over us and there were sprinklers going off in the median. I remember hearing him dragging his feet across the ground and muttering. He was dragging his feet almost like he was trying to brush away the concrete to find something underneath it. The mumbling was incoherent and frantic. Honestly, it made my heart sink into my stomach and knot up. I couldn't understand anything he was saying, and the only way to get home was to go by him. Nick says, "Yo, let's cross the street and get onto the other sidewalk." Tim and I agreed. I remember this so distinctly. We crossed the landscape medium, and a jet of sprinkler water hit me directly in the face and got into my mouth and eyes. It smelled like sulfur and tasted horribly. On the other side, we could hear his mumbling and scraping of his feet clearer. I can now see more details about him. He was smoking a cigarette and was probably 6'5", had a huge green backpack, was extremely skinny, had long gray hair, and is wearing combat boots with blue ripped jeans, and that he had a full white beard. He didn't seem to notice us until we were directly across from him. We all had our eyes locked on his direction when he suddenly stopped walking, talking, and scraping his feet. He looked up from the ground and let out this god-awful screech. It was like he tried to say 100 words at once. None of us knew what he was trying to say. After the initial scream, I could make out, "What the fuck are you doing?" It startled us. We were now 25 yards away from him, and then he screams, "What the fuck are you looking at?" I was a foolish teenager. I piped up to say something smart, and Tim, riding next to me, grabbed onto me and said, "Don't say a fucking word." So I didn't. In hindsight, I'm glad I didn't. He kept screaming in our direction, and we kept riding. The further we rode, the fainter the screaming got. Then it stopped. We crossed the street again to the other side of the road, and made it about a mile down that road, all of us on edge. We glanced over our shoulders constantly to make sure he wasn't following us. We talked briefly about it, how strange it was, etc., but we were glad it was over with, or so we thought. Nick and Tim were riding in front of me when I thought I heard something behind me. I turned around, and there he was, maybe an arm's length away from me, headed directly for me. The yellow raincoat hood was pulled over his head and buttoned. The guy was standing up on his mountain bike, pedaling as hard as he could. We locked eyes and he started screaming. Screaming. He screamed not words, not any language, just a fucking constant scream, as loud as he could. I have chills just writing this now as a 25-year-old grown man with a wife and a baby. If someone ever illustrated that image that I saw, I would probably have a panic attack. I screamed, "He's right behind us!" and stood up and pedaled as hard as I could. I think we all did. And he was right behind us the whole time, screaming. Every so often he would get right up on top of us, screaming and trying to knock us off our bikes. I don't know how long we rode with him behind us, but it felt like an eternity. I think age played a factor because he must have got tired, which led us to get ahead a bit. Exhausted, we pulled into a neighborhood and started cutting through yards trying to lose him. We jumped off our bikes and decided if he's still chasing us, we would make our stand together and fight. It was like a hive mind decision, all too tired to keep running. It was our only option. We waited for him, but he never came. I don't even remember hearing him. I still can't recall when we lost him. I called my house phone, waking both my parents up in the process, and told my dad about the situation. He told me to get home and figure it out. I asked to talk to my mother, and she yelled at me on the phone and refused to come pick me up, as I stood in the middle of the street hoping the crackhead didn't come to kill us all. I got home with Nick and Tim in tow, who asked if they could crash in my room. Of course, I said yes. I think we still have some weird feelings about that night, and we've never spoke about it again. I don't know what he wanted. He was clearly on drugs, but it makes me wonder if he wanted to rob us, or worse. I was 22 and living on my own for the first time when this happened. Mid-90s. I had just gotten off work, 11 p.m. To reach my apartment building, I could either walk on the sidewalk, lit with street lamps, decently trafficked, or cut across the communal garden, pitch black, set back from the street. I saved about 1 whole minute of walking time by cutting through this communal garden, but being young and stupid, a lot of times I took the shortcut. That night, I got a weird feeling to not take the shortcut. I kept on the sidewalk, but there was no one else around. When I got past the garden, all of a sudden this large man pops up at the exit path. There's no way he could have been in front of me or just behind me as I was walking. I would have noticed him. The only logical explanation is he had been hiding in that pitch black garden. A drunk who's been sleeping it off? No, my body was screaming at me to get the hell out of there. I began walking faster. My dad had always taught me to carry my keys in my fist with a key pointed out in case I needed to punch someone, so I had that. But I'm 5'4" and probably weighed 110 pounds. This guy was tall and big. My only chance was to outpace him. I'm speed walking at this point, and I feel like he's matching my pace, or even getting closer. He's breathing heavily. I feel this angry energy coming off of him, but my apartment building is right there, so I just put on a burst of speed. When I reach my entrance, 2 people are leaving and hold the door open for me, and him. I don't know why I didn't tell them that I thought this guy was following me. My mind froze, and I was just trying to get inside my apartment. Plus, I was still trying to rationalize it. Maybe he was visiting someone in the building. Maybe it was all just a coincidence. Don't be paranoid. Besides, it only took a couple seconds for them to open the door. I had missed my chance. I'm climbing the stairs as fast as I can. It's a 3-story building and I live on the 3rd floor. He's climbing the stairs too, still right behind me. I get to my floor, which has 4 apartments on the right side, where I live, and 4 on the left. I pass by apartments 1 and 2. He's still right behind me. I stop at apartment 3, where I live, and he stops in front of apartment 4, where I know he doesn't. He hasn't said anything, just breathing hard, and I think there's no way I'm gonna open my apartment door and have him push me inside and rape me, or worse. He also hasn't knocked on the door of apartment 4. Worth noting is that the apartment is U-shaped. Mine and my neighbor's door are very close together, so I bang on my own apartment door as loud as I could, but yell my neighbor's name. "Hey Kevin, let me in." This startles the guy, even more so when my own apartment door doesn't open, but Kevin's does. Kevin sees the guy standing right in front of his door and asks him what he wants. The guy starts mumbling something about the wrong apartment, but I have my own door open so fast that I'm inside my place in a flash, locking the door behind me. I grab my cordless phone to call the police, but I hear Kevin through the door telling the guy that he needs to leave. The guy does. Kevin knocks on my door, asks if I'm okay. I thank him, say that I am, but I'm inside and I'm frozen, adrenaline pumping, scared. I thank him again and tell him to have a good night, lock my door again. I have my phone in my hand, ready to call the police, but I start to rationalize it again. What exactly happened? A guy followed me home, but then said he had the wrong apartment. Are the cops gonna care about something minor like this? I try to calm myself down, but I'm also berating myself. Why didn't I run the instant I felt him following me? Why didn't I tell the people we passed at the front door when I thought I was being chased? Worse, why didn't I tell Kevin the second he opened his door and saved me? He could have let me inside of his apartment, and we could have called the police together, but because of my stupidity, everything felt so ambiguous, and I was questioning myself. A couple weeks later, I'm visiting my grandparents and my grandfather is reading the paper. He tells me a woman was raped in the apartment building across the street from mine. It's the same guy. He had multiple convictions of sexual assault and had recently been released on parole. I'm an 18-year-old male. One night, I was at the gym around 10 p.m. because I worked all day and my gym stays open all night. I was casually working out as I always have. Out of nowhere, this very short Hispanic guy comes out of nowhere and asks me what I'm doing later. Thinking it was very odd, I decided to ignore him and act like I couldn't hear him because of my headphones. He kept asking me, but eventually left. When I finished my workout, I went into the locker room to get my keys and check myself out in the mirror. As I entered the locker room, the guy was sitting on the bench staring at me, like watching my every move. So I skipped looking at myself in the mirror, grab my keys, and go out of the bathroom quick. I could see that he starts following me as I head to the urinal, so I quickly resort to a stall. When I left the stall, he's staring at me from the urinal. I ignore him and start leaving the gym, but he still follows me. Once again, he asked me what I'm doing tonight and what my name is, but this time I couldn't pretend not to hear him, so I just said, "Sorry man, I'm not interested," and quickly got to my car and drove away. A week later, I had to work this day, so I went to the gym around 10 p.m. and everything was normal. Was working out, saw some friends, and then I saw the same guy from a week ago staring at me while laying against the empty wall. I try to ignore him, but every machine or workout I do, he starts following me. I stay by some friends so he hopefully won't come near me. When those friends left, so did he, so I thought it was safe. I get my stuff together and head out around 11:30. At this point, my phone has died. I was a little worried, but then started to freak out because when I approached my car, there was this rose on my truck handle, driver's side. I actually started to run and went back in to get assistance from someone working there because I didn't feel like dying that day. After removing it, I sped home as fast as I could. A day after, I had a normal workout, didn't see him until I went to my truck. He was parked right next to me, standing in front of his car. When I got in, I could see him watching me the whole time. Now, every time I go late, he's either waiting for me or asking me weird questions. I talked to the workers about this, and they say he's not from here and is just trying to be nice. But I can't help but wonder why he doesn't get the hint when I tell him no all the time. I wake up hours early in the morning to go to the gym now, but when I go late, he's still there watching me every time. What should I do? Another time, there's a rose on my windshield and a phone wire wrapped around my handle. Here's a picture. Then more recently, he added me on Snapchat. I don't know how he knows my name or how he knew that car was mine in the first place. So this happened to me a long time ago, but I never forgotten about it, as it was one of the strangest encounters my family and I have ever had. One time as a child, I went with my family to the grocery store. It was our monthly trip to stock up on groceries, so we were going to be there for a while. I was about 12 at the time, so by that age, I had a good understanding of how to read people. We started in the produce aisle, and suddenly a strange man caught my eye. He was standing there awkwardly close to us, sort of fake browsing the vegetables. His body language seemed off. He was standing with his back to us, but something seemed strange about the way he was positioned. As we slowly moved down the aisle, he would slowly rotate so his back was always facing us. As we got closer, I could tell that he was wearing those see-behind glasses, those gimmick sunglasses that have hidden mirrors on the inside of the lenses, so you can see behind yourself. He had a dirty gray zip-up jacket on, and long messy hair. He had to be in his 40s. Our shopping went on, and wherever we went, I would see him standing there staring at me from across the grocery store. He would keep his distance from us, but always be within eyesight, no matter where we were in the store. About 30 minutes in, my mom still hasn't noticed it, but he was starting to really creep me out. My mom didn't believe me at first. Eventually, we got to the refrigerator aisles, and this is where it got weird. Whatever aisle we were in, he would quickly pace past us occasionally. At this point, he wasn't even trying to look like he was shopping. My mom and sis were starting to notice this and also seemed concerned. At one point, we were grabbing something off one of the shelves, and I could see him just standing on the opposite aisle, peeking through the shelves at us. His sunglasses were still on, but now his hood was up. We started to walk faster and do some random zigzags around the store to see if he was really following us and to try to lose him. But he would keep up, all in a very sneaky way at that. He would always be on the opposite end of the aisle, but he kept up with us the whole time. By this point, my mom was really concerned, so we pushed the cart to the customer service area to talk to the manager about it. By this point, we lost him. We informed the manager, and she was very helpful. She actually went to go find the guy and talk to him. We waited at the counter until she paced back to us with a confused look on her face. She walked up to my mother and told us, "He said, you're his mom." The manager rang us up and said we should leave, and then they would escort the strange man. We walked up to the car, staying close to our mother, when we were met with a horrible sight. The man was standing across the parking lot, across from our car, with his head slightly tilted with a big grin on his face. We floored it out of there, but we could see him just standing there watching us leave. Whoever the guy was in the sunglasses, let's not meet again. This story takes place a few years ago when I was still with my ex-girlfriend. I'm a 22-year-old male. I was 17 or 18 at this moment. I was living with my parents and lived in a little town of 300 people. We had 3 farms in this town, which includes lots of fields. We had a habit of walking those fields thanks to a little path which was really old. There's a place for only one car, truck, or tractor. It was in the afternoon, 5 or 6 p.m., and we decided to eat some stuff on the field near the road, so we could see the road, and the people on the road can see us. The field, which belongs to my neighbor, who are okay with the fact that we're there, is separated from the road thanks to a barbed wire. It's a few miles from my parents' house. We smoked weed, we drank, we eat, and listened to music. Everything is alright. However, at one point, a car parks in the middle of the road, and a guy went out of his car and is doing stuff in the bushes. At this point, I'm thinking, okay, the dude is just picking stuff like nuts or whatever, because it's the end of the summer, but I keep an eye on him. I'm talking with my girlfriend just like I did all afternoon until then, and I look back at him. The guy is standing there behind his car, and he's looking right at us, motionless. I don't say anything, and I look back at my girlfriend. I give it another minute, and then look back. The guy has moved. He is now on the other side of his car, and the same thing. No motion, just looking at us. The same process is about to repeat 2 or 3 times, with him in different locations around his car. I have chills, and I'm thinking the situation isn't normal at all. The guy suddenly went back into his car and moves away. At this moment, I told my girlfriend, pick up your things, we're moving. She thinks I'm kind of overreacting, thinking I'm paranoid because of the weed we smoked, but she listens to me. We're back on the road, going the other way the guy went. The road is a circle, every way leads back to my house. And guess who turned around and is coming right behind us with his car, still looking at us while driving. He keeps driving past and turns around once again to keep staring at us. This process repeats 2 times. At this moment, my girlfriend told me I was right, so we took down his plate and tried to call my parents, but no one is answering. The last time this guy passes, I can clearly see something on his passenger seat, but I don't know what. But at that moment, my neighbor came right behind him. I stopped my neighbor and told her what we just witnessed. She gets us in the truck and takes me back to my house. My dad is a cop. I told him the plate and he looked into it. The car belonged to a grandma and was stolen. End of this part of the story. A few weeks later, as every day, I go to take the bus to the next town, which is about 7 minutes away on bike. It was still dark because it's pretty early in the morning. When I left my parents' home on my bike, I noticed a light behind me. It was his car. I don't know how he knew I was there. Maybe it's pure bad luck for me, but I'm 100% sure it was his car. He followed me until I took a path which a car could not use. Only bikes and pedestrians can take it. I turned off my light and drove until I got to the bus stop in complete dark in order not to be seen by this guy. I kept doing it this way for the next 2 years, and I've never seen him again. To the guy who stole grandma's car and stalked me and my girlfriend, let's not meet again. I usually get over creepy encounters fairly quickly, but this one was quite different from the rest. I go by the rule, be nice to everyone, because you never know who could be a secret serial killer. And that has worked out well for me the majority of the time. Although this time, it's probably what got me into that situation. When I was 18, I worked as a lifeguard at a small pool. Nothing fancy. I was basically just a babysitter to all ages. When adults got bored looking after the kids, they sometimes sought me out, for some reason, to have free therapy sessions. Mothers and fathers talking about their hardships. I know I worked as a lifeguard, but I can't save that kind of life. One day, a 50-year-old man with his 2 kids came to the pool. As many people did, he went up to me and we started talking. It started off as some small talk, like how he didn't let his children eat ketchup because it has the properties to remove rust from metals. But as the hours went by, he started talking badly about one of his kids, how she was overweight, had anger issues, and was worried about the boys when no one would ever look at her. I'm not gonna lie, that last statement made me go quiet, and I tried to somewhat reason with him to not speak like that about his daughter. He seemed to listen to what I had to say, so I was happy that I could possibly help his kid in some way. Having a parent like that would have given anyone a hard time. The next day he came back extremely happy, telling me that I was so good with kids because my talk had apparently helped him. He then began the day by trash talking his ex-wife to oblivion. like how she had most custody over the kids, and that the kids only ate fast food at her house. I didn't say much because I felt like it wasn't my place to speak, and I didn't want to create any unnecessary drama at my workplace. But what set the first red flag in motion was when the conversation suddenly shifted into him wanting a young wife. It was as if he had trash-talked his ex to get me to understand he was single and interested in a relationship with me. The days went by and he continued to visit the pool every day. To some extent, I had a feeling that he now came every day just to see me. I was fairly creeped out by this thought, so I tried to ignore it and just do my work. As the days passed, he started asking more and more personal questions like, where do you usually go grocery shopping? Is there a cafe close to where you live? As I was fairly sure he was trying to figure out where I lived, so I kindly deflected all his questions with something very obscure. During my last work week, I had the afternoon shift. I asked my colleague, who was in the morning shift, if anything had happened that day that I should be aware of. He told me that they had banned a man from entering the pool because he had reached around the counter at the small pool shop where the coworker kept their personal things. Apparently, he was denied by my coworker to get a look at our work calendar, so he had to try to get a glance at it in a more illegal manner. The last week I saw him twice at the end of my shifts, standing near the pool entrance. The second time I saw him, I reported him to pool security. After that, I never saw him again. So I hope we never meet again, you creep. So this happened about 5 years ago. A little background first. My dad had trained me in how to keep calm in stressful or life and death situations. I did the same with my kids. My kids were 12 and 13 years old, and in the back seat, my elderly mom was right next to me. We had just finished our errands, and I asked if anyone wanted to go to a popular small lake that has a one-way road going around it, about a 1-mile circular, before going home. They immediately wanted to do so, mostly to see the new duck chicks. There's a maximum speed limit of 20 miles per hour, and several places to exit if you don't want to go completely around. The reason for the low speed limit is a lot of people go here for fishing, walking, or jogging. We got to see the baby ducks and slowed down to stop a few times and looked and awed over the teeny ducks. There wasn't any cars behind us yet. I was halfway around when this huge man in a big truck went racing along the side of the lake, about 50 miles per hour. There's a lot of screaming from people racing to get out of its way. Immediately, I start speeding up to exit off the road. I was almost there when I heard the truck engine. My mom screamed. The kids were frozen in fear. As I looked in the rearview mirror, he was coming fast on me. He slammed on the brakes and just came inches from hitting the back of my car. Then started following me aggressively and screaming all sorts of insults at me. I sped up and got out of there, but he kept following me. My mom was freaking out. My kids were terrified, but doing the breathing exercises I taught them to keep themselves calm. I yelled at my mom to shut the fuck up. I threw my cell phone to my oldest son and told him to call 911 and inform the dispatcher that we were headed to the police station and to please have a few cops waiting for us. He did so, and at the time screaming in fear as this man went down the side street and turned back to ram us off the road. He gets in front of me and slams on the brakes, parked blocking the road, or to do a pit maneuver. I later thanked God that my dad had been in the military and taught me maneuvers to avoid aggressive drivers. I was able to avoid all the things he was doing. The dispatcher heard the terrified screams every time I had to brake hard or swing the car around. I was cussing like crazy. We made it to the police station, and there were several cops waiting for us. The guy was so angry that I don't think he realized where we were. He parked right behind me to block me in, got out of his truck screaming around to my side, got even more angry when the cops wouldn't let him near me. He swung out and punched one of the cops so hard in the head that he was knocked out. He got tasered and sprayed as he was tackled down. It took several cops to hold him down when he suddenly went quiet. He suddenly realized just where he was and began struggling again, saying that they couldn't arrest him because he didn't know they were cops at the moment. I let out a relieved breath once he was in the backseat of a cop car. Paramedics came to check us all out. My mom had to be taken to the ER for extremely high blood pressure and suffering from chest pains. My kids and I were taken as well. The moment that they realized that we were safe, the hysterical crying and clinging to me started. I was shaking and I felt cold despite the warm temperatures. I was told that I was in shock. After we all came home, except for my mom, who had to stay the night, the kids were too terrified to sleep in their beds and wanted to sleep with me, but we were all too wired to sleep, so I made some sleepy time tea and gave them some melatonin. I, on the other hand, didn't take anything, and the comforting noises my home usually makes became scary. A few days later, I got a call from one of the arresting officers, who told me that the man had several arrest warrants on him for similar things. He also told me that the guy had every intention of killing me and everyone else in my car, simply because he was angry and wanted to release it. So it was a good thing that I called 911 and went to the police station. It would take me a few weeks before I could fall asleep easily again. I had to put my kids into counseling, and I still have nightmares from it, but it's really rare now. I'm an 18-year-old female. This event happened when I was 16. Our home had to have some renovations, so the builders tell us that the renovations will only take a month, and we're able to live in an Airbnb that is thankfully in the same neighborhood as us. I take the bus to and from school, and it's a very long walk from the bus stop to the new location. One thing about me is that I have a very poor sense of direction. Even if I have been taking the same road for years, it's still a possibility that I might forget my way. So I was lost walking home one day, and accidentally found another route on the way to the Airbnb from the bus stop, which added another 10 to 20 minutes to my walk. This is important context to the story. So one day I'm walking home from the bus stop and I'm cursing myself out because it is minus 20 something, and I've accidentally taken the longer route, which is when I noticed a middle-aged man a good distance behind me. At first I shrugged it off because he wasn't very close to me at all, but I began to get concerned because the route I'm taking is not the regular one. It's one where you have to cut in between houses, and it seems too large of a coincidence. He is constantly behind me, even on the absurd route I'm taking. At this point I'm scared, but I don't want to alert him because it's winter and it's already getting dark out, and I'm not strong at all, so my chances of overpowering a grown man are slim to none. I pick up my pace, increasing the already pretty large distance between us, so as soon as I round the corner, there's a fence surrounding the Airbnb, and there's a gate that breaks up the fence and leads to the neighborhood and where the house is. This is technically the way back, and you're not supposed to cross the gate. He has not rounded the corner yet. He is far behind me, so at this point I sprint like my life depended on it, down the sidewalk, and duck under the gate and hide behind the fence. I then climb the porch stairs and peek across the fence. It's a position where I can see the road and sidewalk, but you can't see me from the sidewalk or road. He burst from around the fence, running, probably because the distance between us had grown too large, and stops in his tracks when he does not see me. He pulls out his phone and starts talking, then goes back the way he came from. Until this day, I'm not sure if it was paranoia, or if he generally had bad intentions, but I'm still glad that there was such a distance between us, which is the only way I was able to run off unnoticed by him. So, someone was following me home yesterday, and now I don't want to leave the house. I'm a 15-year-old female. I was walking home from the store yesterday, and I saw a black box car drive past me extremely slow, and the man in the car was clearly watching me. When he did finally pass me, I saw him watching me in his rearview mirror. I thought it was weird and slowed down my pace so that I could tell if he was waiting for me, or just a slow driver. He was still driving extremely slow, but moved a little bit when he saw two guys riding past on bikes. He then moved to the edge of the short street where he waited there. I was still towards the beginning of the street, so I acted like I forgot something and turned around to get out of sight. I waited and kind of peeked out to see if he had left, and when I saw that he was gone, I continued walking. I didn't think it would happen, but I made a mental note that if I saw a car behind me, it meant that he circled back around. After I continued walking, I made 3 turns, and was 3 turns away from my house. When I was walking up the little hill and almost on the 4th turn, I looked back and saw the man in the corner that I had just turned from, letting me know that he circled back around to find me. He sat there watching me continue walking until I got up the hill and turned another corner. Then, as I had barely made the last turn and was very close to my house, I saw the man's car turn the corner up the street straight across from where I was walking, waiting there. I pulled out my phone to call my mom and walked the other way, and he soon left after I pulled out my phone. My mom came out and walked me back to the house, and I didn't see the car for the rest of the day. But I keep thinking, he knows what neighborhood I stay in. What if he comes back? What if the next time he comes back, I'm out by myself again? What if no one's home to call? What if he sees me leaving and comes back when I'm the only one home? I'm so scared that he's going to come back that I don't want to go outside. I don't want to show him where I live, especially because I'm home alone very often. I have summer school and I have to go, but I don't want to leave the house in fear that he might be watching, waiting for me. I'm constantly looking out the windows to see if I spot him, especially since if he was at the store I was at, he definitely stays somewhere near the neighborhood. I got inspired to write this after reading someone else's story about zigzag walking. This happened over 10 years ago. I used to go out drinking with my friends on Fridays and Saturdays at goth bars. I think that was the year that a goth chick had been assaulted and left for dead and was identified thanks to her tattoos. As a result, we were all on extra high alert. When the bars closed, I would never be alone. Sometimes I waited with a friend at the local 24/7 coffee shop until we sobered up and the subway system would start working again at 5 a.m. This time though, my friend Claire, who was also my safety company, really wanted to hang out with another acquaintance of ours, Rick. So I said fine, let's go to Rick's instead of the coffee shop and head out to the subway later. Well, the time was fast approaching and she showed no signs of wanting to leave. She clearly wanted to sleep with him and probably stay. When 5 came, I was tired of feeling awkward and decided I would just leave on my own. Where's the metro station? At the time, we had basic flip phones, not really smart, no active GPS maps to refer to. He gave me the general direction of where to find the station, and I set out. As I walked through the empty, cold Montreal streets in quest to find the stations, I hear footsteps. Crap, what now? I continue to tell myself, it's probably just another individual headed to the station, right? I dare not look behind me completely. Don't walk faster, keep a steady pace. If he senses fear and he is praying, it will excite him. I continue this for a while with no real idea of how long this cat and mouse game is going to go on because I didn't know the area or where the station really was. I decided to see if he was indeed trying to mess with me, so I zigzagged, crossed to the one side of the street, here and there, and listened to see if he followed my pattern. He did, every time. I couldn't tell if this guy wanted to attack me, troll me, or was just playing some sick game to establish dominance. So I kept at it, scared but also not about to give him the satisfaction by panicking. I finally see the station. A teeny bit before the station, the wind blew my scarf a bit ahead of me. Oh shit, not now. I sweat, picked it up, not stopping, hoping he wouldn't take this moment to do something. Finally, I had reached the zone with the other people and considered myself safe. I saw people on both platforms, but will never truly know who it was. Follower in the cold winter streets of Montreal. Let's not meet again. I'm a female and this happened around 2004 when I was 14. I live in England. So at this time, I was in my goth phase of life. I used to hang out in the weekend in the city center where all the goth, emo, alt kids used to hang. I had to get a bus to my home to and from the city center. It was a Saturday and I can't remember if it was almost winter or if I had just stayed out a little later than usual, but it was dark when I was on the bus going home. As I sat on the bus, I realized I needed to grab something from the local corner shop before I went home, so I decided to get off the bus at the stop before I usually get off at, as it's closer to the shop. The shop was about a 7-minute walk from my house. Just to explain a bit about the area, the place where my house was at was a nice, quiet, middle-class housing estate, but walk just a few minutes down the road and you'd be in a rougher area. The shop was in the rougher area, so I got off the bus and crossed the road to walk to the shop. I always felt a bit self-conscious when I was in the rougher area and when I was dressed in all my goth clothes, makeup, etc. Because the rougher area was kind of where all the generally lower class people who dressed act certain ways. Being a goth was like a walking target to be made fun of from these people. As I walked towards the shop, I got a feeling of dread and became aware of a guy that was stood against the wall outside the shop. He was staring at me. I felt uneasy, but just thought this guy was gonna shout an insult at me or whatever, but he didn't. I went to the shop, bought what I needed, and left. I started walking up the road towards where I lived and came aware that someone was walking behind me. I looked back and it was the guy that was stood outside the shop staring at me. I decided to cross onto the other side of the road where there was no other houses, only a school, so I could try to figure out if this guy was following me or if he was just generally going in the same direction as me. The guy crossed the road too. I walked a bit further and decided to cross back onto the other side of the road that I was originally on, and surprise, surprise, the guy crossed the road again behind me. By this point, I was certain that this guy was following me, so I picked up my pace a little and crossed back over, and as I needed to be on the other side of the road to get to my housing estate, the guy still followed and crossed behind me. As we were on the verge of my housing estate, I honestly don't know why I did it, but I decided to turn around and confront him. I asked him if he was following me. He denied it. I said I noticed him outside of the shop and mentioned how he crossed behind me every time I crossed the road. He was still denying following me. He was intoxicated with either drink or drugs, or both. Now that I'd seen him up close, he clearly was a lot older than me, probably in his 30s. He then started to ask me to go to a friend's party with him. I asked him where the party was, and it was back in the rougher area, even further than that shop I walked from. I told him no, and told him my age, so he was aware that I was a child. And after I told him I was 14, he was still asking me to come to the party with him. I reaffirmed to him that I was not going to go to the party, and that I was just trying to get home. I wasn't being confrontational, as I was scared of angering him. If anything, I was being quite nice and polite, considering he was an absolute creep. I then said something like, "I just want to go home without you following me." And he told me to walk and that he wasn't going to follow me. I started walking. I took a few steps and he had once again started walking towards me, following me. This is where I ran for my life, and he started to run after me. The problem I had now is that my house is pretty much a straight line from where we were, so if I went to my house, he would see where I lived. So I ran straight past my house around the corner, out of sight, and went to a neighbor, family, friend's house. Their door wasn't visible from the street, so fortunately, I lost him. Fortunately, my neighbor answered the door and let me in, and I phoned my mom and the police. My mom came to the neighbor's house as soon as she was called, and the police came out, and I don't know if they ever caught the guy, as I never heard anything back. I don't know what would have happened to me if he had caught up to me, or if I had been stupid enough to go to the party with him, but honestly, I dread to think. Needless to say, I never got off the bus at that bus stop again. It's been quite a few years since this happened, so my memory is fuzzy, but I figured I would try to piece this stuff together. This was around summertime of 2018 or so I must have been freshly 14. My grandma had given me a couple quarters and told me to go to the community laundry room to get a Dr. Pepper from the vending machine. She offered enough for me to get one as well, and it was still light enough so I think I could walk down the sidewalk and get back before the sunset if I was quick enough. Getting into the laundry room and getting a soda was easy enough, but as soon as I exited the building, a car idling in the middle of the street caught my eye. It hadn't been there when I had gone in. I was already put off by this, as I had stranger danger drilled into my head for as long as I could remember. The car had its windows rolled down, and the driver was a young woman with two older, I want to say mid-30s men in the back seat. They were looking straight at me and beckoning me closer. I immediately thought, fuck no, to myself and quickly broke eye contact and made my way quickly back down the street. As if the car knew the complex, they drove alongside me and pulled into the parking spot next to my grandmother's car. They start laughing with each other, still looking at me and whispering about something. At this point, I was terrified out of my little 14-year-old mind. I walked quickly inside my grandmother's apartment, locked and bolted the doors, and couldn't sleep for the rest of my visit. Nothing came of it, but I thank my lucky stars every day that I avoided anything more than an unsettling encounter. So weirdos from my grandmother's old apartment complex. Let's not meet. This happened when I was 16. I'm a female. I was at an outdoor festival close to home and decided to go there by bike. The festival finished, I grabbed my bike and noticed that I had a flat tire. It was raining super hard and it was 11:30 p.m., so the skies were black already. I was about to walk home and a friend said that he would walk with me. I said, "Nah, you still got a long travel ahead of you. I'll be fine on my own." He lived out of town. He insisted on going with me anyways because he wanted to make sure I got home safe. So we started walking. About 10 minutes into the walk, on an abandoned road, a car drove by with 3 or 4 guys, I think 25 to 30 years old, and slowed down, yelling how sexy I looked, and some more inappropriate things, and if I wanted to get into the car. We kept on walking, not responding at all. One guy in the car whispers to the rest, "Alright, let's go. This girl isn't alone." And they drove away. No clue what would have happened if I was alone, but I was happy that my friend was with me that night. My heart was racing. I'm currently 28 and I still remember, and have not told many people about this to be honest. Guys in the car, let's not meet. I just read another story on here about someone having an encounter and their dog possibly saving their life, and it reminded me of my own story with my pup. I rescued a pit bull from a neglected family. She was skin and bones when she came home and extremely submissive. After a week of love, affection, and food, she was the most amazing dog I have ever met. The softest, cuddliest baby who wouldn't even play fight with me unless she was under the blanket and did not know it was me. So I needed a quick late night run to my local shop. There's a 40-minute round trip on the main road with houses, or a 15-minute round trip through an alleyway that wraps around the back of the school fields. The alleyway has no street lamps, but I've never heard of anything bad happening, so I didn't think anything of it. So I set out with my dog in tow. Just before I reached the entrance, she stood still as a rock. I gently tried to usher her to follow me, but she refused. When I took my headphones off, I realized that she was softly growling and that I could hear a group of male voices coming from the alley. They soon came close enough where I could see them, and I think there was about 5 or 6 of them. This was during COVID, so they were all wearing masks with their hoods up. This is my mom's advice, but I don't know if it's the best thing to do. My mom always told me that if I found myself in a situation like this, to not act scared. Being scared shows that you're an easy target. With that in mind, I tugged firmly on my dog's lead to get her to follow me. She stuck to my side, literally pressing her body against my leg as I walked. Yes, it was awkward. And yes, I had to try very hard to walk normally. She was quietly growling the whole time. The men had stopped where they're standing slightly off the path to the side at this point. They were talking quietly amongst themselves as we walked by. I couldn't really hear much as my heartbeat was pounding in my ears and my gut was screaming at me. Once I knew I was at the point where the darkness of the alley made me essentially invisible, I heard one of them raise their voice slightly and say, "Nah, that's a pit," in a way that sounded like he was disagreeing. Now, they could have been the breed of my dog. That is a likely scenario. But my gut feeling I had while I was walking past and for the duration of my walk through the alley makes me believe otherwise. I think those men were discussing possibly robbing me, or worse, and my soft baby who was literally scared of her own reflection deterred them due to being an aggressive breed. It's safe to say that we walked the long way home now. So creepy group of men, let's not meet again. This happened years ago when I lived in eastern Pennsylvania. I am a petite girl, and at the time, I was in my mid-20s, but looked much younger, so I might have made more of a target. I was driving home from work in the evening when I realized a truck had driven past earlier. A large pickup with a Confederate flag across the front was making the same turns as me through residential areas, and then started to tailgate me as well. The people inside were a middle-aged man who was driving and a little boy in the passenger seat. The guy made a point to follow me through several neighborhoods, and even though multiple last-minute turns I made to check if it wasn't just a coincidence and ran stop signs, as we drove I started to feel more and more panicked. I knew I couldn't just drive to my house, but I was so freaked out that I didn't even think about going to the police at the time. This went on for about 20 minutes, but it felt way longer. I eventually got to a shopping center parking lot with a lot of pedestrian traffic and pulled in. As soon as I drove into the area with a bunch of people walking around and loading groceries, this guy peeled off through the parking lot past me and sped away, screeching his tires. I'm not sure if he thought it would be funny to scare a young girl as a game with his son, or if he actually had worse motives. I eventually left the area. There were a lot of missing person reports in the area, and plenty of encounters being reported of other people being followed around, followed in stores, or followed home. I got tired of living somewhere that you don't even feel safe to grab groceries alone. I was recently driving home from a campsite in southern Minnesota. I was driving on the back roads as I left a tiny town, maybe 500 people, and I noticed a silver SUV ahead of me. They were about a half mile in front of me. The SUV pulled over to the shoulder of the road. No flashers. I went around them, pulling into the other lane to be nice. As soon as I get by them, they pull right back onto the road right behind me. I go through another small town and a bigger town, 20,000 people, and I'm turning from a single lane to a double. Traffic law states to go to the closest lane. I went to the far one, and they stayed right behind me. I am nervous at this point that they have been following me for about 30 to 40 minutes. I keep telling myself it was just a coincidence. I knew my next turn did not have a turn lane. I decided to make the corner without signaling. I had signaled every other turn I had made, and so had the SUV. I was keeping my eye on him, but no signal. He just followed me around the corner. I had not slowed down to give him a clue that I was turning either. The SUV followed me for another 30 minutes. I finally lost him when I barely made it through a railroad crossing before the train. He was stuck on the other side of the train from me. I made the last 30 minutes of my drive with no signs of the silver SUV. This happened about 10 years ago when I was around 18 years old. I had met up with some friends after work and was making my way home around 11 p.m. I wasn't far from my house when I realized I walked past a man that was going the other way. I noticed that he stopped and looked at me before turning around to follow me in the opposite direction of where he had been going. I thought it was weird, but I was, and am, fairly oblivious sometimes, and rather stupid, so I just keep walking home. At the time, my front door was in a badly lit alley, and it was as I turned down that I noticed this man was still following me. He was keeping his distance, but I saw him peeking around the corner of the street as I started walking down it. Now, I might be oblivious, but someone that staring me from behind the corner after following me for a while was enough to set me off. I panicked and decided I wanted to get somewhere safe. I started walking quickly into this alleyway to get to my door as quick as possible. My brother was a fisherman at the time who often brought his work home, so we had a few large fishing weights, about 1 foot long and 1 inch thick, by our front door. Still in fight or flight mode, I picked up one of them and turned to face the front of the alleyway. When the man turned to enter the alleyway, I looked at him and shouted, "Excuse me, why the hell are you following me?" Looking back now, it probably wasn't the best move, but thankfully it worked. He turned around and left. The whole thing shook me up a little bit, so I went home and crashed from the adrenaline rush. Thankfully, I never saw this guy again, so this is now just a distant memory. I'm currently traveling the sea with my 2 brothers. We just arrived in Saigon this morning. In the evening after dinner and a few beers, me and my 2 brothers, one older, one younger, decided to sit on the beach and have a quick smoke. We were chatting away, sat at the beach when we noticed a Vietnamese man repeatedly looking at us and walking in circles very near to where we were sitting. At first I wasn't concerned about it. However, my spider senses were alerted. Then a minute or 2 later I noticed another Vietnamese man dressed as a grab and delivery driver, acting suspiciously and repeatedly looking at me and my brothers. The stalkers were both on their phone, and I believe they were communicating with each other. Being in a foreign country, this alerted us heavily, and we decided to leave. However, it was a good 600-meter walk to the park exit. As we were walking, I noticed both Vietnamese men had gone on mopeds and were following us through the park, stopping behind trees and watching us. They then overtook us and sat on a bench further down the path, waiting for us to cross their path. Being aware of this, we left the path and started walking in the muddy grass as the crow flies to the nearest exit, avoiding the 2 men who were still watching us and clearly had bad intentions. We had 100 meters from the exit when my younger brother looks behind us and sees the men sprinting towards us. My younger brother took stance, standing his ground, and asked the man what he wanted. The man's posture became very small, and he began talking very quietly. Both me and my younger brother kept a good distance and told him to leave us alone as we walked backwards towards the exit. Noticing the second assailant was also approaching us wearing motorcycle gear, helmet and motorcycle gloves. However, my oldest brother decided instead of trying to get out of the situation, he got closer to the whispering Vietnamese man to hear what he was saying. Both me and my younger brother were yelling at him to get the fuck out of there, but he was being a dumbass. It took the Vietnamese guy 5 seconds to win my brother's trust. Then out of nowhere, when my older brother was leaning in very close trying to hear the whispering man, the guy grabbed my brother's crotch, grabbing his dong. He was shocked. I was ready to fight, expecting to be robbed or something, but the dong grabber was super unexpected and a real curveball. After the dong grab, we started shouting and approaching the men in an aggressive manner, in fighting stances. This slowed down their approach enough to make a dash to the park exit. For context, both me and my younger brother are competing MMA fighters. I posted one of my fights on Reddit if you don't believe me. However, this whole situation was unexpected. We didn't engage in any violence towards the men, just shouted at them. We walked out of the exit into the busy city and walked around for a while making sure that we were not being followed before heading back to the hotel. What's your take on the story? Be careful in parks at night in Vietnam? Or dong grabbers be peeking from behind trees? I was stalked for over 10 years. This happened in the late 90s. I'm a female 43, and my friend, Rose, female 42, met him together. My stalker was a guy that Rose and I met on the bus one day, coming home from volunteer work after school as a candy striper at the local hospital. We were on the bus going home, laughing and talking, and this guy just randomly sits up by us and starts talking. He tells us his name, and we laugh, thinking that he said his name was Gay. Yeah, stupid teenage girls. He corrected us and said his name was Jay. We talked a bit more, and innocently gave him our names. He was like 7 years older and kind of strange the more we talked to him, and he asked for my number, but I said no. He got annoyed, but whatever, right? So we thought that was that. A few days later, maybe a week later, me and my same friend ran into Jay while switching buses downtown. I was going to her house like I did a few times a week when we ran into him. He asked me to hang out and watch him play hockey that night. I said no, that I was going to my friend's. He got weirdly annoyed and kept trying to beg me, telling me how much fun it would be and trying to get me away from my friend. He really didn't want her to come to the hockey game either, just wanted it to be us. So weird. Our bus finally came and we got out of there so fast. Over the next few weeks I kept running into him downtown. It was like he knew my schedule. Every time I tried to be nice and get away as fast as I could, and every time he would get annoyed because I didn't want to hang out. A few weeks passed and I'm in school, and in walks Jay. I was so mad and frustrated and snapped on him. Why was he here? And how did he know what school I went to? Did he follow me on the city bus? He tried saying that he was here to see his friends, but he wasn't with anyone. Just a guy around 25 years old, wandering around a high school. After that, I randomly saw him on my bus, and he would always sit across from me and watch. He would still ask for us to hang out, and I would still say no. As time went on, he would still find me on the bus and sit across from me with who I guess was his girlfriend, or a girl he was trying to make me jealous with. He would look at me while he would make out with her. He would do everything he could to make me feel uncomfortable. I would either turn up my music or do my best to ignore him or move to another spot. Nothing ever seemed to deter him. He never did anything bad enough to call the police, but he knew what was wrong and even knew that I had panic attacks, and I'm sure he got off to that. As the years went on, I would see less and less of him. He'd randomly pop up and make me uncomfortable. He started standing real close to me and trying to talk. I would have a panic attack and do my best to ignore him. I would still walk away and he would get more and more pushy. Every time I would run into him, I'd text my friend that was there the first time we ran into him and get her to try to calm me down. It's now 2023, so about 24 years since it all started, and I haven't seen him in the last 8 years, and praying that I'll never see him again. I'm 43, so he must be around 50, but I'm so scared to run into him. I have thought I saw him a few times and panicked, but it wasn't him. I really hope I never see him again. This happened a long time ago, about 10 years or so, but I never forgot about it and it still gives me the chills. I'm a 33-year-old female and was in my early 20s. At the time, I had a female dog named Nina, a boxer. She passed away when she was 8 from lung cancer. I miss her a lot. Nina was very energetic, so I took her on long walks around the neighborhood, usually at the end of the day, around 4 to 6 p.m., when it wasn't too hot, but not dark either. One thing you must know about Nina is she loved people. She did not get along with any other dogs, but every time she saw someone walking up to us, she would shake her tail and want to get closer and ask for pets. One day, we went on our walk as usual. Everything was fine for the most of it. I saw a few dog tutors walking their dogs, an old couple sitting in front of their house chatting, and then when we were alone, Nina suddenly started growling. One thing I didn't mention before, I am a graduate in biology and specialized in animal behavior. At the time of the story, I was finishing college, so I used to pay a lot of attention to my dog's behavior. I had quite a lot of knowledge on dog behavior because it was my favorite subject in the area. Dogs can see movement much better than us, like the eyebrows raise or a little tension on the shoulders they can pick up easily. So of course, a dog growling doesn't sound that weird. Nina did growl at other dogs and cats once she saw them, but this was different. It was very low and all the fur on her back was up. Her entire behavior was of alarm, and then I noticed she was looking back while growling. So I looked back behind me. In the distance, a block away, I saw a man. This made me even more alert, because Nina had never growled at anyone on the street before. She never stopped walking by my side or tried to pull away, but she kept this low growl and kept staring at this man. I started to freak out and turned the next block. She stopped for a second, but when we reached the next corner, she started growling again, and there he was again. He didn't try to talk. His expression was serious, kind of emotionless. I kept walking in random patterns, and he was always there. That man was definitely following me. At some point, our distance started to shrink. Nina's growling was getting stronger. So when I turned the next corner, I started to run while I wasn't in his line of sight. I ran down about 4 blocks in the direction of an area I knew had more traffic and people around. I stopped to catch my breath and looked behind me. He was far away in the right corner from where I started running. Just there, standing and looking at me. Nina was looking at him, still with her alarmed posture. After about a minute, he turned around and went away in the same direction. In that moment, Nina finally relaxed. I paid attention to Nina's behavior the entire way back to the house, but she was just her normal happy self. I told the story to my parents and a few neighbors, and no one seemed to know of any guy that looked like that. I never saw him again, and Nina never behaved like that again either. So I'll never know who he was and why he was following me, but I definitely do not regret trusting Nina's instincts. So people, please pay attention to your pet's behavior as much as you can. It's not about a supernatural sixth sense. They can actually feel, see, and hear better than us, and there's no behavior that happens for no reason. There is always a reason. Stay safe, everyone. So this story happened when I was a kid. My parents were divorced, and my older sister had a baby that she would always pawn off on me. My dad and stepmom showed up at our house when my mother was at work. They had decided to take us to the fair. That would have been great, but I had my 1-year-old niece with me that I was babysitting. I told my dad it was not a good idea because I was babysitting. He insisted, and basically I was forced and had to take my niece. Once we got to the fair, my dad and stepmom gave my sister, my stepbrother, and me $20 and told us to have fun. I should mention here I was 12 years old, and they still expected me to watch my niece. There's not much you can do at the fair with a baby in tow, so I went to one of the snack trucks and bought ice cream for the both of us. That was when I first noticed the man. He was heavy set, probably in his 40s, and he was staring at us. There's something about the way he was staring that freaked me out. I'm not sure if it was me or my niece that he was interested in, but either way, I was freaked out. I told myself I was overreacting and got up and walked off carrying my niece. He followed. I walked all around the fair looking for my dad and my stepmother, my stepbrother, my sister. I couldn't find any of them anywhere, and the whole time the man followed. I had to pee, but I didn't want to go into the bathroom. I was afraid of him following us in. I ditched my niece's stroller. I just wanted her in my arms, and the stroller was slowing us down. So this has been going on for about 3 hours, and it was getting dark outside. I was terrified and scared for my niece and myself. I kept trying to lose the guy, turning down different paths, but he kept following. Finally, I saw a man in a security outfit. I ran up to him, full on crying now. I told him I couldn't find my family, and a strange man had been following us. When I went to point the man out, he was gone. The security guard took us to the tent, I think it was a first aid tent. They kept telling me that they could watch my niece and for me to relax. I was very shaken. I refused to let her out of my sight. They had me call my mother, who screamed at me for going while I was supposed to be babysitting. She told me that I was grounded and irresponsible. Finally, my dad and stepmother were found and brought to get us. They were also mad at me for calling my mother. They took us home, and when I got there, I told my mother about the man. I wasn't grounded anymore, but her and my father went to war over visitations. Just a couple years before, 2 girls had gone missing at the fair and were never found. My mother was beyond pissed that they made us go and then ditched us. My father, until the day he died, had an attitude with me about this event and said I overreacted. To this day, I hate fairs. Hi. Thought I'd share my experience in case anyone's been through something similar or has an idea of what kind of scenario I was dealing with. I was driving home from the gym at night and pulled up to a red light near a local courthouse. I noticed the driver of a white Jeep 1 lane over staring at me. Older guy, I'd guess in his late 40s to 50s, with long sideburns. I'm a 31-year-old male. I turned and looked at him, and he started pointing towards me, towards my left. At first, I thought he wanted to cut in front of me when the light turned green, which is strange because there's no one coming behind us, so he could have just waited for me to go. But I guess someone else might pull up. I pointed to my left to confirm that that's what he wanted, and then I opened my window a tiny bit because he kept pointing, so I wanted to ask what was up. He didn't open his. The light turned green and he changed lanes and drove behind me. It feels likely that he was trying to tell me to pull over earlier. I kept driving and changed lanes because he was tailgating me. He followed me immediately. Eventually he switched lanes, but was driving erratically. Kept putting his left turn signal on, but not turning left for several lights, for example. He slowed down to maintain the same pace as me a few times. Eventually I turned before my actual home route to throw him off. He kept going, but I just looped around and actually headed home. I saw him waiting at a light to turn left towards my house, so I kept driving. I'm not sure what his intentions were, but that was strange and unnerving to say the least. This literally just happened to me, so I'll try not to ramble too much. I work an evening shift, so I get home about 10 p.m. most nights. Tonight, about 2.5 blocks from my house, I'm stopped at a stop sign behind a big red truck who's turning left. It's late, we're on a 2-lane, 20-mile-per-hour limit residential street, so when it takes a truck a long minute to turn, with no cross traffic, I'm wondering, what the heck? But I don't really care. I'm not a fast driver or in a real hurry on the road. He creeps through his turn really slow. Now I'm more alert, and he's out of the way enough. I see he's going slow to watch the car in front. The little black car parked on the road, not on the curb. Passenger door is open, and a guy is standing there yelling at someone, but I couldn't see who. The car was on, but the lights were off, so I assume they aren't driving and go around in a wide arc, slower than normal, but nowhere near as slow as the truck that turned. Half a block later, I see headlights behind me. They don't speed up on me or give me any indication that anything is wrong. They stay about a half a block behind me. I've got no more stop signs and a straight shot home, so I'm not even thinking about the car behind me. I turn the car off, open my door crack, and shuffle around for my phone, bag, etc. They fucking stopped in front of my driveway. I slam and lock my door fast, and then their passenger door opens and some guy gets out. At this point, I'm debating whether to call my husband who's inside, but probably asleep, or the police, and settle on the police when their interior light turns on and I see 2, both looking my way. The one who got out says loud enough for me to hear, "It's right here, man. That door just shut. I'm telling you, right here." He sounds drunk, and I've got 911 dialed and ready for as soon as he takes a single step closer. But instead, he gets back into the car. They sit there for a minute longer with the interior lights on, and I swear we locked eyes. I'm shaking. I can't figure out if I'm gonna start crying or yell at them. They zoom off way faster than they pulled up. I sit in the car for a whole 6 minutes, waiting to see which way they'd go, and to be sure they left. Which they drive off all the way straight out, but back towards the way they came. Then I went in and cried when I realized they stopped a few feet short of where our security cam would have captured their faces. This area is known for petty crime, vandalism, and bike thievery, not violence towards strangers. I don't want to drive anymore. I don't want to know what they wanted, but I do want some pepper spray on my keychain now. My skin still crawls thinking about this guy. He saw me shopping for school supplies and things for my new apartment one evening during the first week of grad school and decided I was his mark. I just moved to my new college town, didn't even have a cell phone yet after leaving the one my folks paid for during undergrad behind. I was grown and could take care of myself. What a nimwit I was. As I left the parking lot with my purchases, I noticed a truck pulled behind me at the exit. It was late and there weren't many people out. I pulled out and so did he. It was a few miles down a long retail street with lots of stoplights before my turn. As I drove, I realized this guy in the truck was trying to get my attention. I was in a relationship, so I ignored him. Over the next few miles, he kept trying to get me to look at him. Some red lights he would end up ahead of me, some behind or beside. At every light he would position himself so he could stare at me, either directly or in his mirrors. His gaze was unwavering, and my anxiety rose. He was driving oddly, speeding up close to my bumper, hitting his brakes when he was in front of me, swerving close to my car a couple times. Finally, at a red light when he was beside me, I glanced over and absolutely started to panic when I first met an unbelievably empty, unwavering stare and realized that he was fiddling with himself. He was getting off at the fact that I was terrified. He was following me and trying to force me to pull over. At one point, I scooted through the intersection at a yellow, and a couple of cars were ahead of him, thinking I could shake him. Nope, he went around those cars at the red light and ran it and got back in front of me. A freeway entrance ramp came up, and I tried to fake him out by putting on my signal and getting into the merge lane for it. He took the bait and started up the ramp. I quickly got out of the merge lane and continued straight. Again, I hoped I would lose him, but he drove his truck back up the embankment and kept following. At another light, when he was beside me, I pulled through the light and turned at the last possible second. He made a U-turn and ran another red to follow me. My panic really ramped up at this point. With no cell phone, no sense of direction, in a new city, I really didn't know what to do. So I turned on the classic rock and forced myself to sing along and forced myself to go the speed limit so I wouldn't crash out of terrified stupidity. I decided to drive all the way to the supermarket across town because I remembered it had a police station in it. He followed me all the way there. He burned out of it as soon as he saw the cop cruisers parked in front. I filed a police report and asked the police to escort me home. I insisted because something told me that this creep was waiting for me to leave the police station. He was. As soon as I pulled out, I saw him. I pulled over and told the officer following me, and he went after him, but the truck had taken off and the cops couldn't catch him. The police got surveillance video from the first store. It turned out this jerk had been dogging me the entire time I was shopping. I saw him on the security footage following me through the store, and saw him following me out, close enough to grab my elbow. I saw the footage of him circling the lot in the truck waiting for me to pull out when I took too long to unload my cart. My heart just sank. I was able to remember 6 of the 7 digits from his license plate and the make and model of his truck. In the end, the cops did nothing. They said it was a he said, she said. The surveillance video didn't catch him doing anything particularly unlawful, and it was a losing effort to try to charge him with anything. I ended up trading vehicles with my friend for a couple months to feel safer and went on with my life. I had no idea what this disgusting piece of shit did just a handful of months later, until almost 15 years had passed. I was watching a Discovery ID show about a kidnapping and murder of Sandy Jeffers. I almost fell out of my seat when I saw the mugshot of her killer, Aaron Lee Skeen. It was him. I was so disgusted that the law enforcement did nothing in my case that I tracked down the investigator in the murder case, and after verifying some of the things about the vehicle that was changed in the TV reenactment to weed out people making up crap, she took my contact info and social statement. She can neither confirm nor deny that my run-in was with Skeen, but ended her statement by saying, "At least you don't have to worry about him anymore, because he's got life without parole." I only wish that something could have been done when he terrorized me. Perhaps things would have ended different for Sandy. So, creepy murder stalker crazy dude, let's never ever meet again. When I was in high school, I had a strange encounter riding my bike home from work. When I was a senior in high school, I worked at a Target store from about 4 p.m. until 10 p.m. 4 to 5 nights a week. After helping close the store, see out the registers, and other final closing tasks, my coworker and I were usually at the building on our way home before 10:30. The store was not too far from the bike path that went close to my home. It took me about 15 to 20 minutes to ride my bike home from work down that path in a large subdivision. At about the midway point home, there was a section of the bike trail that went through an undeveloped field that was poorly lit. I remember I was slowing down, changing the radio station on my CD Walkman. Yes, I'm dating myself here. When suddenly I see a dark figure about 100 feet away from me, starting to run at me from a dark field. Fight or flight instantly kicked in, and I started riding my 10-speed mountain bike as fast as I could. I felt like I was qualified for the Tour de France. As I was escaping, I took a quick peek back and saw the guy in black attempting to chase after me for a few moments. Needless to say, what was normally a 15 to 20 minute bike ride turned into a 5-minute top speed and top gear bike ride home. I obviously didn't sleep well that night, but still occasionally think about that encounter in my darker moments. I had a guy follow me home. I was out getting coffee, and I'm walking home, and there's this dude on the sidewalk checking me out. Whatever, that's fine. It happens. But then I see him again. Like this man got in his car and drove ahead of me. Like I didn't see him get out of his car the second time. I just saw him standing there. Then I'm walking to my apartment building, about to buzz myself in. There he is, right behind me, running in. He got close to me. Mind you, it's fucking daylight. Then after he finally leaves, I go into my building and let the Uber Eats guy in, who was there the whole time. Then he starts hitting on me. Like it's fine to get compliments, but I don't want them right after I got fucking followed into my building. He was also very persistent and wouldn't take no for an answer. I'm a 26-year-old female. I recently moved from the US to the Balkans for a summer legal internship. After a few days of getting settled into my home for the summer, I decided to sign up for a gym nearby my apartment to serve as a self-care ritual and blow off steam after tough work days. Coming home from my first workout at the new gym, endorphins on 100, I noticed at the crosswalk that a man across from the busy street where I stopped was staring at me. Now, this is not super uncommon, as I have found in my new home. I've gotten used to dealing with the occasional male stares, but they're usually very brief. This guy, however, was not looking away. I stared back for a full beat, so I knew that he knew I saw him, hoping that would be the end of it. And then I turned my head away and continued to walk down the street, trying to avoid the creepy feeling that this wasn't the end of the interaction. From what I could tell, he didn't cross the lengthy street to meet me, and probably just continued down from his side. Next thing I know, about 2 minutes later, I'm at the crosswalk, about to cross, when I see him in my peripheral, next to me, at the stop. How he crossed the street and sped up to meet me so quickly is either a reflection of his cunning and athletic prowess or my general lack of observation skills. Standing next to me now, he is still staring at me, but I try not to tip him off that I'm noticing this. I take off as fast as I can when it's safe to cross the crosswalk, and naturally, he matches my pace, a step or so behind me, still staring. Here I find myself in a familiar situation that I imagine many who have been followed also find themselves. It is a critical juncture, if you will, where you ask, is this someone following me, or a silly misunderstanding? I begin to ask myself, am I overreacting? I've been followed many times before, sadly, and I've found the best way to handle it is try to cut the baby in half, so to speak. I give them the benefit of the doubt to prove to me that they aren't doing what I fear they're doing, while also trying to avoid any situation that would escalate the danger or cue them off to where I'm going. Trust, but verify. So I decide to zip quickly towards another street, not my own, in hopes that he would prove me wrong and not continue to follow me. This was a busy intersection, and there are about 6 different streets to follow from the crosswalk. He follows me down the random street I chose, where there was truly only one residential building, no stores or restaurants he could have been headed towards, to explain him choosing the street unless he lived nearby. I do something I've done before when followed, to test the other person. I slow down and speed up my pace randomly to see if they match mine, or like a normal person heading somewhere, try to walk by me, as there is plenty of room on the street to do so. Within a block or so, I realize that he's definitely following. Definitely still staring, but not only that, with every few steps, I feel his presence, keeping pace, was also subtly getting closer and closer to me. The sun was setting at this point, and we were walking towards the part of town I don't know as well. I decided to make a break for it. I slowed down, as slow as I've gone throughout the entire pursuit, checked my peripheral, and jetted myself across the street until I get to the other side. I look back once I'm there to see that he is now looking across the street and moving towards it to follow me more. But this time, I gave him the miniest glare I could muster and reached to my bag as to suggest that I was reaching for pepper spray or something. He notices my gesture, makes eye contact, stops, and then literally turns his head away to feign looking at numbers on the street, like he was lost or looking for a specific spot. As if he hadn't been slowing up and speeding down with me for the past 10 minutes, not looking anywhere but my backside. He continued to pretend to look around, glance back at me, look around some more, glance back at me, and when he looks away the 3rd time, I decide now it's truly time to make a break for it. I began booking it down the opposite street while occasionally peering back to see if he kept following. I'd take a bunch of well-lit, busy streets, employing random unnecessary turns, as I have when I've been followed before. Eventually, once I checked the whole street, I feel confident I had lost him. I finally calculate my way back home. The next day, I asked my friend from work, who is local, to take me to get some pepper spray. I bought the mini version, the small size, that can fit easily in my purse. Some background. I'm a 28-year-old female. I'm a dog walker, pet sitter. Some of the dogs I walk are very reactive, as the one dog, a pit bull lab mix. She used to be a bad puller, along with being incredibly reactive to other dogs on leashes as soon as she would see them. Through lots of work and training with her, she has come a long way with her reactivity to the point it's really not an issue anymore. Even when the owner's carelessness allows a dog to get too close for comfort. On this one walk, she was a dream the whole time, past multiple dogs without issue. She would just look at me for a treat that she knew she would get if she was good. When we turned down the street that looked completely vacant at the time, so I could give her some more relaxed walking time. All went well for a while, not a soul in sight, until there was. While I'm usually very good at keeping my head on a swivel, as some of my walks are not in the safest areas of the city, this guy took me by surprise. I don't know how he did it, but he got about 2 or 3 feet behind us without the dog or me knowing he was there. All of a sudden he shouted something unintelligibly. I could only make out the last two words, "Your dog." Immediately, my dog, with no prior history of human reactivity, got between us and started growling, snapping, and lunging aggressively at the man. I'm a smaller woman at 5'3", and I guess this guy was around 6'7" at the very least, and incredibly muscular. As soon as he saw my dog trying to attack him, and me struggling to hold her back, he threw up his arms and bolted across the street without another word. Disappeared shortly after around the corner. I've never praised a dog for reactivity until that moment. Gave her all the treats I had left in my pocket, took her home, and told her owner what just happened and how her dog might have saved my life. Of course, I hope I'm wrong, and this guy was just slow on social cues, but neither the dog nor I got that impression. Needless to say, she's by far my favorite client's dog. I go on walks with her still every week, but I haven't gone down that street again while there are no people out. I'm beyond blessed to have her and get to walk her weekly, but I hope I never meet your dog guy again. This happened around the summer of 2022. After I met with two performer friends to rehearse for the upcoming show. I was catching the night bus to get back to the subway station where my car was. As I took the train while it was still operating, I was already uneasy as I'm a femme presenting individual, but I had no money to get a taxi or Lyft at the time. The bus finally came around, so I got on and paid the $2 bus fare and sat down. The rest of the ride was pretty uneventful, as everyone was keeping to themselves. Pretty soon, the bus began to empty out as people got off at their stations, where it was me and one man who was giving me some weird vibes. I caught him looking at me a few times out of nowhere during the bus ride, but now he was asleep. I prayed that he would not get off at the same stop as me, but unfortunately, that's exactly what happened once I finally got to my stop. When I began walking towards my car, I looked behind me to find that the man was following me. He was keeping a bit of a distance from me, but I was still paranoid that he was 100% following me. I began to pick up the pace, getting my keys out while also clutching onto my pocket knife my roommate gave me for protection. As soon as I reached my car, I jumped in and immediately locked the doors. The man at this point caught up to me and walked over to the passenger side of my car. But fortunately, I had already locked it, so he couldn't get in. Not even bothering to put my seatbelt on, I started my engine and drove off out of the parking lot quickly. Once I felt safe enough, I put my seatbelt on and flagged down a member of security for the transportation system. I saw that the man who stalked me was still at the station, so I pointed him out and explained what happened. The security officer looked a bit annoyed, but it wasn't annoyance at me. It was annoyance like, I can't believe this is happening again. He told me that he'll take it from here, and I thanked him before driving back to my apartment. A few days later, I bought pepper spray, and ever since that evening, I have never left my apartment without it. I keep it out and ready to be used, and fortunately, I haven't had a repeat of being stalked to my car. It scares me to think though, what would have happened if I didn't lock my doors on time? What would the stranger have done to me? Would he have pulled out a weapon or tried to take advantage of me? I feel as if the story is not as bad as most of what I read on here, but I still feel the need to share it. In 2018, I moved to a bigger city in another country and got accustomed to the public transport pretty fast. The city is in Europe and actually known to be one of the safer places. At the time, I took the public bus to school every morning, around 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. My younger brother's school was also on the same route. He got off a few stations ahead of me, but I would often take him to school and pick him up on my way back since he was only 8 years old at the time. I was 15. The routine went on for a year, and at some point, while taking the bus at the same time every morning, I knew the faces of the people I see almost every morning on the bus. I gradually started to notice this man stare at my brother and me. He was probably in his late 20s or early 30s. He was pretty short, skinny, with glasses and a bit of a beard. After some time, he would smile while looking at us, and I explained it to myself as him thinking that we were a cute pair of siblings or something. Despite that, his staring got more intense after a while and was not discreet at all. He started getting off at the same station as me, where my school was. Fortunately, there was a few different schools in the area, so he couldn't have known for sure which one was mine, right? I hope so, at least. One day I was late for class because my younger brother missed his station, so I returned him to school and barely managed to catch the next bus, running for it. I entered the bus, short of breath and happy I made it. I sat down by the window, right by the door. I looked to my side, since I felt a stare, and there he was again, standing, despite many empty seats, staring at me, trying to catch my breath. I turned my head to the front again, trying to pretend I didn't notice him. I got off one station before, in case the bus got stuck on the busy intersection ahead, and started walking to school through the shortcut. Because I was in a hurry, I didn't notice that he had gotten off behind me as well. He probably walked behind me for around 100 meters before realizing I didn't notice him, and decided to approach me. He creepily peeked through my right side, started walking pretty close next to me. He greeted me and I awkwardly stepped away while walking ahead at the same pace. He said, "We saw each other a few times on the bus, right?" I answered something along the lines of, "No, sorry, I don't know you." He then started asking me pretty creepy questions like, "You're in high school, aren't you? Where's your brother today? He wasn't with you. That's your brother, right?" I was flustered, so I just uttered a similar sentence again. "Sorry, I don't know you." He then made this ridiculous remark how he didn't know me either. "So you want to talk?" He continued following me very near my school, but after realizing it was also more crowded in that part of the city center, he gave up and made his way through one of the alleys, separating from me. I sighed out of relief and told a few classmates what happened. They were pretty angry at him, so they told me to call them to wait in front of the school in case it happens again. I stopped seeing him on the bus sometime after that, which made me think it wasn't his actual bus and that he was just there to stare at minors. After COVID calmed down, I started noticing him again, but I don't think he recognized me. I now wear glasses, I lost some weight, and wear more makeup than before. Kinda turned into a metalhead, so my style changed as well. He even stood next to me a few times, but I am taller than him, so I'm not worthy of staring at anymore. He prefers minors, and still stares at extremely young girls on the bus, especially if they wear shorts. I've gained some confidence to be the one catching him staring at thighs of girls, and then staring him down in disgust. He often looks down after that. I wish I had some sort of evidence to report him, but he never actually touches anyone, thank God. I wish I could say let's not meet again, but I still see him on the bus. Except now I'm older and able to spot out a predator when I see one. When I was 15 and 16, I used to sneak over to my boyfriend's house that was just around the block. I wasn't allowed to date him cause crazy stepdad and all. Anyway, I leave my house to meet up with my friends. It's summertime in Chicago, about 5:30, still light out but the sun is starting to set. In my town there's a bunch of kids that would meet at a convenience store that was kind of in the middle of our teeny town. My boyfriend and I lived all the way on the opposite side of this middle part of town. It's a super cute town. All the houses look the same, bungalows, trees line the nicely manicured lawns, and no matter where you are, you know someone that lives on a street or two away. While I was walking about 5 blocks away from my destination alone, I remember crossing the street and seeing 2 young guys across from the opposite side of the road. Not weird, but my nana always taught me to be suspicious of anyone. So the guy is on the opposite side of the road, a little behind me. I'm aware of him and make sure he knows this as I look at him. This is something I learned growing up, and I just keep going on my way, not really concerned at this point. A block later, he crosses over and speeds up closer to me. I can't describe how or why, but this is when all my nerves were on high alert. He's close enough, I could see his face and the look in his eyes. Maybe this is when I should tell you that I'm not even 5 feet at this point in my life, and I was well under 100 pounds. I'm teeny. I grabbed my phone and pretended to call someone, yelling so they could hear me. I'm coming upstairs, right now, hurry. And I dart up some random person's stairs to their front door. When I look back, he's right at the bottom of the sidewalk, out of breath, and made it look like, fuck you, and walked away. I snuck behind some bushes and waited a bit to make sure he left and called my boyfriend. I ran the last few blocks to meet up with my friends. Maybe it was nothing, but my gut tells me different. I still remember the guy's face, and from time to time try to look up to see if someone matches his description in the news. One of my favorite places to go on walks is a city cemetery. It's quiet, shaded, and next to a mildly busy intersection should something out of the ordinary happen. Sometimes there are other walkers too that politely smile. Other times there are mourners to politely avoid. And there are wildlife like geese, squirrels, and the occasional owl. I was in the old part of the cemetery when this happened. It's smaller than the main cemetery, but more hilly for better cardio. A large white SUV with tinted windows pulls into the cemetery. No big deal. Probably not mourners, as this portion is old. The most recent grave that I've seen was dated from 1960, with the vast majority coming from the 1800s, but maybe looking for a family grave for history's sake. I know where they are going as to not disturb them. But they don't stop. Again, not a problem. The plates were out of country, so I figured that they were looking for a plot. I adjust course to give them some space. As a history nerd, I think of how cool it is to see someone tracing their history. You hear it a lot about shivers up a spine, or hairs on the neck standing up, and that's what happened to me. The SUV was not stopping. Instead, they started to follow me. I adjusted my course again, and they did too. At one point, they were actually directly parallel to me, just a series of plots away. By now, I had shut my music off, but kept my earbuds in. I slowed my pace and made sure to acknowledge them. Yes, I see you, creepy SUV. Keep your distance, and I'll keep mine. I noticed that the passenger rear window rolled down and a woman in the back seat. She quickly ducks down when she sees me staring at them. The driver and the front passenger still had their window up. This SUV has now slowed down even more, almost to a stop, and I pick up my pace and did a little half jog across the lawn. The voice in my head was telling me, stay calm, alert, but to get going. I pulled out my phone to call my husband to tell him what was going on, while I gripped my car keys in my fist as a makeshift weapon. The moment I did this, that SUV moved again. I made it to my car, and they had maneuvered themselves to face my vehicle, albeit almost a full way across the cemetery. When I left, they did too. Now, logically, they were probably looking for a plot. The lady in the back seat was no older than 25, so she probably got embarrassed when she realized how weird her family members looked, following me around like that. And who targets people in a cemetery? But what if and why follow me after I changed course? This happened to me when I was 16. I was going back home after a long day of high school and decided to use a shortcut since I was so exhausted. My dad had forbidden me from using that shortcut because I had to go through a park that was full of homeless men taking drugs. But I wanted to go home quickly and relax, so I used the shortcut anyway. I got past that park without nothing particular happening, but shortly after I noticed two men slowly driving a motorcycle and looking at me. They laughed for some reason. They drove by immediately after, so I didn't think much of it. But they came back, and again, they drove slowly near me and laughed while looking, and then drove by. I started to feel creeped out and hold my bag tight because I thought they were thieves. They were common in my city. They usually snatch a bag from you or your phone before you notice. I made the decision in my head to give them my bag if they wanted it and run. I only have 2 school manuals in there, and it's not worth my safety if they are armed. It happened a third time at this point, and I had enough. I started to walk faster, and I looked behind me every 2 seconds to see if they were there, and I saw them following me slowly. Finally, I lost them, but every time I heard the sound of a motorcycle behind me, I looked around nervously. My dad scolded me when I told him what happened, but was relieved that nothing bad happened to me. I never took that shortcut ever again. I can't stop myself from wondering, what did they want from me? I guess I'll never get an answer. I live in Melbourne, Australia, western suburbs, in the bad part of town. I don't have a car, so I rely on public transportation. I went to go see a friend who lives literally downtown. I live 9 stations away from there. I got to the station at 11 p.m. I'm a male, 28 years old, and don't usually worry about walking at night and stuff like that. The walk home from the station is about 25 minutes up a main road. Then I turn off into my road and walk a bit further. As I'm walking down the main road, I notice someone who is walking behind me a bit further away from me. I thought nothing of it. He was just the only one around, since it was late on a weekday. I kept track of him, and he bolted towards me, then stopped and did some strange mannerisms, like with his hands. I can't describe it. Then he stopped again, just standing there. I was so scared, and started to walk faster to get home. As I got to the point of me having to walk in my street, I was thinking, for the love of Christ, please still don't be following me. But my heart sank to the floor when I also saw him turn the corner. I bolted as fast as I could, but he caught up to me. I was frozen in fear. He was wearing camo pants and a black hoodie covering his whole face. He was honestly the creepiest man I've ever seen when he took off his black mask that he was wearing. He never hurt me, but he said, "I've been watching you for a while. You shouldn't walk around at night. Next time, I won't be so forgiving." He did this with a strange facial expression, jumped up and down, and then bolted away. I made it home, and I was so scared that I called my dad, and he told me to never walk home at night again, especially that late at night. I told him that I always do it, and he just replied with, "I should know better." I'm happy he didn't find the house I live in, because when he caught up to me, I was about halfway there. I'm not going to walk home at night ever again. I used to be employed as a child protective worker. A report came through. I was given the investigation by my team leader. When I interviewed the oldest child with the police, she had visible physical injuries and told me exactly what happened. I'll spare the details, but it's horrific. As the child was in his sole care, we knew they needed to be removed immediately. We sent a team of workers out to the child's school while myself and my colleague called the stepfather into the office. I led the interview, and it was horrible. He didn't even try to deny that he had hurt his stepchild, basically saying, "That's my kid. I'll do whatever I want, and you can't stop me." When I served him with the paperwork, he absolutely lost his mind. He was swearing and screaming and said, "If we were outside the building right now, I would fucking kill you." We ended up running out of the interview room, pressing the emergency alarm, and even had to make a police report about the whole thing. It got really messy. The next day, we were in court for the children, and my manager decided I shouldn't attend due to everything that happened the previous day. My colleagues who attended told me that the man was at court and yelled several times something to the effect of, "Where's that bitch of a worker who took my kids?" I remember feeling a little freaked out, but it's not uncommon to hear things similar to this when you have removed a child. It's understandable that emotions are very high. You build a little resilience working in the field, and overall I mainly felt relief that these children were placed with their aunt and were safe. About 2 weeks later, I had stayed back late in the office on an unrelated job. It was 9 p.m. when I finished, and I was the only person there. I walked out the back of the building to my car. It was really dark, but when I got close, I thought I saw a shadow moving in front of my car, just for a second, and then it was gone. I was about 20 meters away at this point, but it startled me. I stood there for a second, looking at my car, wondering if I was just being paranoid. While staring into the darkness, I started hearing rustling noises, and whether imagined or not, all the true crime horror stories I've ever heard flashed into my mind. Safe to say, I freaked myself out and sprinted back to the building. I called my boyfriend to come pick me up, explaining what just happened. By the time he drove up to the front doors, I had convinced myself that I was just being silly and asked him to drive me around to my car. He circled around with his headlights shining in the car, and I could very clearly see that all 4 of my tires had been slashed. I was an absolute mess that night and called the police immediately. I was pretty sure that this man was responsible for it, but I had not seen him, so I couldn't say for sure. I took a few days off and came back to a meeting with my manager, who had put together a safety plan for me and the other staff. She organized for security guards to escort us out to our car and said very clearly that no one was to stay in this building after hours alone. Then about a week later, a letter was delivered to the office addressed to me. Any mail that comes into our office goes through the reception staff. Our lovely receptionist opened it, and it was a note that said, "You're good as dead, bitch." The words were typed and printed. She was an older woman and burst into tears when she read it. It didn't say who had sent it, but I'm convinced that it's the same man. Over the next few weeks, letters kept coming in, each one getting longer. They addressed me as bitch or homewrecker, saying that I kidnapped and abused children. It was horrible, horrible stuff. The threats in the letters were the worst. The person writing them threatening to rape, torture, kill, and find out where I live and burn down the entire building. To be honest, the police were less than helpful. They basically said that given the nature of our work, they couldn't conclusively say that it was the man, although they had questioned him. To me, it seemed like a pretty massive coincidence. I had never had anything happen like this before. They did say that they were taking every letter very seriously and tracking down where they were posted from, but I never heard anything back about that. My workplace took these threats seriously too. All of the security was bumped up across the building, and all staff completed refresher training on emergency management. One day on the way home from work, I noticed a car was following me. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid, so I drove down a bunch of little streets, doubling back on the same route in the way that made absolutely no sense. Even after all that, the dark green Camry was still placed a little way behind me. I freaked out, but I already planned in my head what I would do in this situation. I headed straight to the police station, pulled right in front of the building, and beat my horn until I had someone's attention. The second I pulled into the police station, the green Camry drove past and disappeared down a nearby street. I sat there for a good 20 minutes, scared to get out of my car in case they came back around the corner. It dawned on me that in my panic, I had forgotten to take down the license plate number. This upsets me to this day. I told the police what I knew, but they told me that the man didn't have any car registered in his name. This was the last straw for me. I was a nervous wreck. I was looking around constantly at work and at home. I knew that he lived relatively close to me, so I even stopped going grocery shopping in case I ran into him. I stayed on stress leave for a month and heard from my colleagues that the letters kept arriving. I was honestly ready to quit, but then COVID happened. It really changed everything. Everyone went into lockdown and all access to the office were restricted. I started back working from home, driving a work car to and from appointments. I didn't go into the office regularly anymore, only allowed in small work groups when absolutely necessary. Over the next year, the letters slowed and eventually stopped. By the time we were allowed to go back into the office, there weren't any signs of this man for almost 7 months. About a year later, I left child protection. I don't know what happened with those children, but my hope is that they're happy and safe with their family. This happened over 10 years ago, so excuse me if some of the details are a little fuzzy. When I was in high school, my friend Claire came to a sleepover. We had plans to sneak out and hang out with some guys, and then one of them would drive us home. We got out of my friend's apartment, have some fun, and around midnight we decided it's time for us to head back. But when we asked to be taken back, everyone says no, despite previously agreeing to bring us back. Everyone said that they were either too drunk or too high, so we eventually decided to just start walking back and would make some phone calls to see if anyone could pick us up and bring us the rest of the way. My house was a good 20 minutes away by car, on the highway, so there was no way that we were walking all the way back. The apartment that we were partying at was towards the back of the complex, so we start making our way to the entrance. We don't even get halfway there before a car starts slowly rolling up behind us. I was 15 or 16 at the time and very naive to the ways of the world back then, so I wasn't too concerned. But Claire was a little smarter than me on this night. She tells me to start walking faster, so we start walking faster. The car picks up their pace behind us. Again, she tells me to walk faster. We start moving as fast as we can, and that's when the car pulled slightly in front of us, and two of the passenger doors opened, and two men got out. Realizing that there is no walking faster to get out of the situation, she instructs me, "Run now." So she takes off running, and I follow her. She runs towards a group of parked cars and jumps behind the pickup truck. For a minute, we prayed that we weren't spotted. This is where details get a little fuzzy. One of them must have gotten back in the car at some point, as there's only one of them following us behind the truck. We hear footsteps quickly approaching. Claire quietly indicates that we're going into stealth mode. This man is on the other side of the truck that we're hiding behind. He's circling the truck looking for us, and we're slowly and quietly circling on the opposite side to avoid being spotted. It felt like a scene from a movie or video game. We somehow managed to do 2 or 3 circles around the vehicle without being detected, and by the grace of the gods, he gives up and decides to go back to the car with his friends. This is our one shot to get away. She tells me to run again, so we run for what felt like an eternity, but it was probably more around 15 to 20 seconds. We find a pool house area and spot a place to hide. We are hidden behind some fences and bushes, and we're anxiously waiting to see if they discover us. Their car pulls up to the pool house, and we're biting our nails, hoping that they don't stop and get out. The car slowly drives away, and we realize that we haven't been spotted. We were safe for now. But the car circled around the apartment complex for hours and hours. They weren't giving up on looking for us. We were safe for the time being, but we needed to find a way out of there. It was in the middle of winter, and of course we were dressed to impress the guys that we were hanging out with. So short shorts and revealing tops. We were freezing. We found a disgusting Captain America blanket that we huddled under while making phone calls to some of our friends to pick us up. We tried contacting the guy from the apartment, but no one answered our calls. None of our friends answered our calls either. We felt completely alone and hopeless. Around 5 a.m., someone finally answered and said that they would pick us up. The best news I have ever heard in my life. Our friend gets to the apartment complex, but can't find the pool house. The group of men are still constantly circling around, but there's no way we're coming out of hiding. We managed to figure out where our friend is with a little detective work, figuring out the building that they're facing was in front of them, and are there dumpsters nearby, etc. We figure out where they are and make a run for it. We spot their car and hop in as fast as we can. "Go, go, go," we tell them, and our friend speeds off towards the entrance. We pass the group of men on our way out, and that's the last we saw of them. We make it back around 6 a.m., just in time to sneak in without my parents ever knowing that we had left. If Claire hadn't been with me that night, I definitely would have been abducted, raped, or possibly killed. So thankful for Claire and her friend that picked us up, but a big fuck you to the adult men who we went to hang out with as teenagers, and especially fuck you to the guys who intended to harm us. On a happier note, I am now very diligent and aware of my surroundings. and we washed that dirty Captain America blanket and shared custody of it for years after the encounter. I live in a city in the Midwest and was hanging out at my friend's house one night. As I was leaving, it was dark, probably 10 or 11 at night. I'm a small woman and look a lot younger than I am, and so I have experienced quite a few creepy encounters, sadly. This one still makes me nervous. I walk to my vehicle, which is parked on the right end of the sidewalk, and get in. I live about 4 minutes away, so I'm kind of on autopilot. I never noticed anything until the SUV behind me seems like they are making the same turns. Sometimes I get paranoid that people are following me though, and continue to drive. I assume they'll turn at any moment, as they often do. Except when I pull into my driveway, they pull across the end. They block me in. I'm terrified at this point, so I call my husband inside and stay in my car. He walks to the door and they pull away. I still wonder why they followed me home and what would have happened if I was alone. I just got off work. Today I worked 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Around 10:45, a man walks in. I've previously had odd encounters with this man, such as seeing him walk behind me around my neighborhood and him hang out near my street. I had brushed those off since I live right next to where I worked and figured he probably lived there, but always kept an eye on him. Anyway, this man comes in and orders his usual pastry. I work in a bakery, and tells me I'm going to stay inside and eat my pastry. For anyone who doesn't know, my country is currently under lockdown because of coronavirus, and all dining indoors is strictly prohibited. Not to mention my bakery is tiny, and there has never been any tables to sit inside, only a coffee bar that has never had space to sit in. I tell him, we're on lockdown, you can't really eat inside. His response chills me. Are you alone here? Yes, I responded stupidly, but quickly tried to catch myself. But my coworker will be here soon. A complete lie. It's about 11 a.m. and my coworker isn't scheduled until about 1 p.m. when I'm off. Then no one will see me in here, he responds, and goes back to eating his pastry at the coffee counter. I roll my eyes and go back to work, not getting paid enough to care if he quickly eats his pastry and leaves. 10 minutes pass, then 15. This guy is still in my bakery. I look over and he's finished his pastry and is moving closer to the open space in the counter meant for employees to walk back and forth between the front of the store and the employees only side. Now I start to get uncomfortable. I quickly text my coworker, a 30-year-old man who owns a lot of guns and treats me like a little sister. I look over and this man's even closer and is now reading a book and is peeking at me from above it, watching me. Multiple customers come in and out during his stay. Every time I turn my back to him, he gets closer and closer, until eventually he's halfway into our employees only area. I begin frantically texting my coworker, and he tells me that he's 4 minutes away. I finally make the decision to text my boyfriend. I avoided doing this so to keep from scaring him, but now I was terrified. I sat in the back of the employees area watching this guy. I held a knife just in case he decided to come any closer. Just as he takes a step closer, my coworker bursts through the door. A confrontation ensues, and the man leaves the shop but continues to sit in his parked car right in front and stares at me. I tell my coworker about the previous experiences I've had with him, and he's had enough. He marches out to the guy's car and tells the man the next time he comes around, it will be his last. My boyfriend pulls up at this point and joins in with a warning. So Matthew, aka my stalker, let's not meet again. I'm really writing this out as a way to vent because I'm in a situation where I feel really stuck. Any advice is appreciated, but I'm not sure there's anything that can be said that will actually help. I've tried just about everything. I'm going to start from the beginning. This is a story 2 years in the making, and I'll try to be as thorough as possible. In 2019, I graduated with a master's degree and moved to a relatively rural area for my PhD. Thinking we would make an investment, my dad and I purchased a house. The intent was to rent it out once I completed my PhD. This house was only a block away from a dive bar, where my dad was able to make pretty good friends. He introduced me to everyone, and everyone let me know that I would be so happy in my new house, because the next door neighbor was the absolute nicest guy you could ever meet. So we met the neighbor, and he did seem nice enough. He suggested that we exchange numbers just in case I ever needed anything, and I thought it was a good idea. What's the worst that could happen? A few days later, my dad left to go back to his home in another state. I was left to my own devices. Literally, the day that he left, it started. My neighbor texted me while I was away and let me know that he left a gift for me on my front porch. In this text exchange, he started using the pet names like Sweetie and Cutie. I went home and he had left a hand-painted feeding dish for my cat in my mailbox. At this point, I wasn't that alarmed. He was just being nice, I thought. The next day, he sent me more texts with pet names, and I took this opportunity to make sure he knew that I was not interested in anything romantic. He replied back with a rambling text about how all a person ever needs is a friend, and he would like to be friends with me. After that, he would send me texts frequently, everything from inviting me to fishing to telling me that he left more gifts on my porch. I would often not reply or tell him I was busy. I didn't want to be rude, but I also had no interest in any sort of a relationship with him, other than neighborly. One night, I got a text from the manager of the bar down the street, letting me know that if my neighbor knocked on my door, I shouldn't answer. She then told me that my neighbor had walked down to the bar with a hatchet and told the bartender that he was hearing voices that were getting louder as he got closer to the bar. He threatened to kill someone with a hatchet if the voices didn't stop. They called the police and the police took the hatchet from him, but made no arrest. The manager from the bar picked me up and I spent the night at her house. She told me that the police said that the neighbor was on meth. After that, I tried to distance myself even more, but things got even weirder. One day I went outside to my car to find a dead squirrel in my driveway. The squirrel had very clearly been run over and moved right in front of my driver's side door. I stepped over it, got in my car, and left. When I returned, the squirrel was gone. Shortly after, I received a text from my neighbor that said, "Someone or something put a dead squirrel in your driveway. Don't worry, I moved it for you." I felt like this was a weird way to word this, and I suspected that he was the one who put the squirrel in my driveway. Another time, I walked out of my house to see he had placed an unspent shotgun shell on a brick in his front yard. He came out and told me that this was to serve as a warning for anyone walking between our houses. For the next couple months, I did my best to avoid him. He would text me inviting me over, and I would come up with excuses or just ignore him completely. I wanted to remain cordial since he was my neighbor, but it was getting very annoying and I was uncomfortable. He would text me as soon as I got home, which told me that he was watching me come and go from my house. Around Halloween, he handcrafted a large casket and wrote, "Here lies the son of a bitch who played mind games, November 2012. What the fuck? All this time, sending me texts. Eventually, I got fed up and stopped responding completely. Less than 2 weeks after I stopped responding, he threw a 50-pound flower pot at my front door. You know, those big concrete planters. Yeah, one of those. I called the police, who advised me to get a stalking, no contact order. A few days later, I was watching TV when a notification popped up that my neighbor was trying to cast a video to my screen. I declined it twice. I filed another report with the police. During this time, I started the process of getting a stalking no contact order. I saw 3 different victims advocates who all told me different things. I went out of town for a conference, and during this time, someone had attempted breaking into my home. I had an ADT security system, So while they didn't succeed, I was aware of the attempt. After the conference, I came home to the entire world shutting down because of COVID. I was trapped in my home 24/7 with my stalker neighbor next door. Luckily, court proceedings for protection orders did not stop. Right before court, he sent me a text telling me that he was sorry for what he had done, that he could tell when he saw me outside that he made me uncomfortable. Then went on to tell me that he could tell that my hair had got longer and that I looked beautiful. I went to court and provided all the evidence I had, the timeline of everything that had ever happened, the text he sent me asking if I wanted a massage, the text I sent to him telling him that the way that he was speaking to me was inappropriate, the text saying that he knew he made me feel uncomfortable. I told the judge that I expected he attempted to break into my house while I was out of town. The kicker is, he didn't deny any of it. Actually, he told the judge that he took full accountability for everything. He said that he was in recovery and trying to turn over a new leaf. He said he didn't oppose the protection order at all. So, in March 2020, I actually received the stalking no contact order. Everything was pretty quiet for a while. I mean, he did do some weird shit, but that's because he's a weird guy. It wasn't anything that made me fear for my safety. That's until he got on drugs again. This time, we found an unspent shotgun casing in my flower bed. It was consistent with the one that he had previously used to send a warning. This occurred a couple months after I started dating my boyfriend, and I suspect it was a warning to him. After this, and for a variety of reasons, my boyfriend moved in with me. He moved in pretty quickly, but everything turned out fine. We're still together and as happy in our relationship as we can be. New Year's 2021, I was awoken to yelling. I turned on my security cameras and got footage of him sticking his head out of his window and screaming obscenities at my bedroom window for about 7 minutes. It doesn't sound like a lot of time, but when your stalker is screaming threats and obscenities, 7 minutes can be a long time. He called me a harlot. He said, "Happy fucking New Year." He said that he was gonna blow up his house with the gas line. I called the police, who responded. They told me that he never said my name, so they can't prove that he was in violation of the protection order. The officer said, and I quote, "There's nothing illegal about yelling in your own house." They left without speaking to him. All I could do at this point was do my best to avoid him. I parked on the street because my driveway is pretty close to his front porch. I got used to living with my curtains drawn. I always made sure that the cameras were charged, all 5 of them. Yes, because of him, I spent over $1,000 on cameras. Every inch of my yard was covered. Since then, he has been seen by other neighbors, talking to people who aren't there, going outside and screaming nonsense. Things like, "I have Cheerios on my necklace," or, "I'll put my penis in your butt." I'm not even joking. This basically brings me to last week. In the morning, I was getting ready for the day when I heard screaming, "Someone is gonna die over this sweatshirt." I turned on the cameras. I got footage of him walking around the alley behind my house screaming, "Are you fucking proud? How about I get my shotgun? I'll get everyone all fired up." I called the police once again. They didn't charge him with violation of the protection order. Instead, they gave him an ordinance violation for disturbing the peace. The police told me that it seems like he's off his medication again, and that was that. They left. Last night, I was woken up by hammering outside my window at 1 a.m. He was cutting down his privacy fence horizontally. I called the police for a noise complaint, and they just told him to stop, and that was that. As I write this, he's outside continuing to horizontally cut down his privacy fence. That means the privacy fence only stands about 3 feet tall now. That fence was the one thing that made me feel relatively safe about hanging out in my backyard, and now it's gone. All of this is to say, I'm fucking tired. I just want to live in a house where I can be sure that my neighbor won't try to kill me, where I can feel confident that he's not trying to break in. My boyfriend and I are trying to buy a house and move, but it's difficult. I'm a PhD student, so I don't make much money. Renting won't work because I have 4 cats, and finding a place to rent with so much animals can be difficult, if not impossible. I refuse to rehome them, so maybe it's particularly my fault I'm stuck in this situation. My dad has agreed to co-sign another mortgage, and I've gotten a second job. We should be able to save up enough money within a few months, but until then, I'm stuck. I just don't know what else to do. I'm tired. I'm angry. So I figured I'd write this to vent. I'm a 33-year-old female. I went to a convention with 2 female friends and stayed in the downtown area hotel near the convention center. Catty corner from our hotel was a chain drugstore. It was still light outside and we decided to get some snacks to eat while we were watching Netflix that night. While my friends were looking for candy, I stood back because I wanted some chips and noticed a man next to them. He wasn't looking at the candy, he was watching them. They hadn't noticed, so when they picked their candy, I whispered them to follow me. I picked up the pace, turned quickly down the middle, and down an aisle. I told them there's a creepy guy there, and to stay together. That's when I noticed he's on the other end of the aisle. We kept taking turns down the various aisles, and he's following us, but walking where he's between us and the exit. At this time, we're basically trapped in the back of the store near the pharmacy. The line for the pharmacy was long, but it was full of men, so we got in line and started talking to the men in front of us, hoping that would scare off our stalker. We could still see him in the big globe mirror, one aisle down waiting for us. We waited in that line for 30 minutes to ask for security. The security swept the pharmacy and the stalker guy had left. We were extra thankful when the security guard offered to walk us back to the front of our hotel. I don't know what intentions that guy had for us, but I'm glad I'll never find out. This happened when I was about 12 or 13, and I went back to look at the books on the other side of the store by myself, while my parents were shopping. When I was there, I noticed this guy that was about 5 feet away from me. I didn't really pay much attention to him, and just went to the other side of the shelf. But then he also went to the other side, when I did. I was a little uncomfortable, but I thought it was just a coincidence, so I went back to the other side. Again, when I went to the other side, so did he. He started getting closer and closer to me, making me a little more freaked out, and he still followed me every time I would go to the other side. At this point, we're just circling the shelves, so when he was still walking to the other side, I went to the DVD section that was next to the shelf. I saw him look around, and then a woman, who I assumed was his wife, appeared next to him, and he whispered something to her, and they both started looking around. I was kind of shaking because I knew that they were looking for me. Fortunately, my parents came just in time, and when we were leaving I saw them again, glaring at me. This happened 2 days ago. I'm a 22-year-old female. I live in an apartment in a large downtown area right next to my university. So I was pulling into the parking lot of the CVS near my apartment, and I noticed a woman standing at one of the other cars near mine, talking to a man inside. When I got out, they started walking in, and the woman tried to flag me down and talk to me. I just ignored her and walked into the store. The man who was in the car got out and followed me in. He followed me through several aisles before stopping me to ask if I wanted to be on his OnlyFans and make porn videos for him. I told him that I wasn't interested multiple times, but he continues to ask me questions about myself, my name, where I work, live, and if I have an OnlyFans. He started to describe sexual acts he wanted to do with me for his OF. I was so scared in the moment and wasn't sure what else to do. But eventually, after I turned down his offer enough times, he walked away and left the store without buying anything. What was really weird is that he was wearing an obviously fake lab coat and said he was in town for a pharmacist convention. I don't know. When I got to the register to check out, I noticed an employee looking out the window, and one of them told the other to call the police if they saw that woman again. When I got to my car, the man was still sitting in his car right next to mine. Luckily, I don't think he was able to follow me out due to the busy area I was in. In retrospect, I think this guy might have been a human trafficker looking for easy targets. I just hope no one else was bothered by him and decided to go anywhere with him. Stay vigilant, ladies. Edit. I did make a report to my local police in case anyone else had an encounter with this guy. Also, I do carry mace. So this happened about a year ago, and I still don't return to the store without my husband. So last July, I took my then 4 and 6-year-old sons to Target to shop for back to school. Since having kids and hearing all these horror stories, I'm very observant of my surroundings when I'm out. Anyways, while in Target, like most women, I looked through all the sections. When in the women's clothing, I noticed 2 older men close by that kept looking over our way. I thought maybe I was just being paranoid, so I kept going on with my business, but keeping my boys super close. We go to the baby section, then pop-ups, toys, makeup, and the same thing. I was really feeling uneasy because they seemed to be everywhere we were, and they never had a cart. One guy was holding one little thing. I go to check out and wait for a big group of nurses leaving Starbucks to walk out with. I threw my boys in the car without buckling them and locked the doors. As soon as I look up, the 2 guys walk out empty-handed, looking around. I didn't think they saw me, so I started to leave. When I looked in the rearview mirror and saw them behind me in a truck, I stopped right there, turned around, and took a photo of them, making sure that they could see me. They turn like they're going back to the store and park a couple stores down where they can no longer see me. And I call the cops. While on the phone with them, in a full-blown panic attack, I watch one of the guys change his shirt and go back inside. I waited until the police got there so I could make sure that they got and had the right guys. I don't know what their plan was for that day, but my mama gut told me that it wasn't anything good. I'm so thankful that my babies and I are okay. Okay, so I just want to start off by saying I'm posting this just because I want to vent about what happened yesterday, because I'm still freaked out. So this all started because my mom needed a few things from Walmart, and I was going there anyways, so I decided to save her the trouble and get them for her. I get what I need and check out. I walk outside and realize I parked on the other side of the store, so I started walking. I had this uneasy feeling, but I pushed it away by saying it was just my social anxiety kicking in. So I get to the row I'm parked in, and I'm closing in on my car when I notice these 2 guys walking behind me. I thought nothing of it because Walmart was packed when I went in. So I just ignored them until I realized that they weren't stopping. They were following me all the way back to my car. To put it in perspective, I parked on the way end, away from everyone else, so I wouldn't get my car door smacked in. They stopped a few feet from my spot beside me and watched me get in my car. They had to be about late 20s, early 30s. They stood there for a minute, but walked away when they saw me pull my phone out. I called my dad, shaking and explaining everything to him. He stayed on the phone with me until I calmed down enough to drive home. You might be saying, well, that's not that bad, but it gets worse. I'm still on the phone with my dad, trying to calm down when I noticed they came back, but this time they're in their car. They slowly drove by my car, and the one in the passenger seat looks at me with a creepy smile and waves at me in a flirty way, and then they drove away. Let's just say I didn't leave that parking lot for a long time. Side note, I was so shaken up, I forgot to pay attention to the road and almost crashed into a car that was speeding in the parking lot. Also, I know the men knew I was only 16 to 18 years old because I have a school parking lot pass on my rearview mirror. I was about 12. Me and my mom had gone to town 45 minutes out to do some shopping with some of her friends. I had a corn snake at the time, so I asked her if I could walk around the pet store one door down from the mini supermarket she was shopping in to compare prices of frozen mice with our local seller. She said sure, just to be back as soon as I was done. The pet store had been there as long as I can remember. It had a very warehouse feel about it and was poorly lit by dim fluorescent lights too far above the ground. Before checking out the mice, I just wanted to check around the rest of the store, being the curious 12-year-old I was. As I was roaming the aisles, I noticed him. He was in every aisle I strolled down. Bald, middle age, a bit tubby, wearing dark plumber overalls over a white shirt. It was summer and it was hot. I remember thinking, why on earth would you come into a non-air conditioning building like that? He carried a basket, but there's nothing in it. He slowly stalked me down the aisles. I noticed his basket wasn't getting any fuller. I started walking faster, taking random turns down different aisles to see if I was just being paranoid, but he was always 10 to 15 feet behind me. At some point, I finally thought I lost him. I power walked out of the pet store, and as soon as I cleared the doors, I sprinted down the street to the mini supermarket that my mom was in. She hadn't even made it down the second aisle completely. I caught up to her, immediately stripped off my bright pink hoodie and slung it in the cart, as well as ripped out the hair ties in my hair. I was smart for doing that because when I looked back at the door, he was standing there, still carrying the basket from the pet store and scanning the store for any sight of a 12-year-old girl in a bright pink hoodie and ponytail. When we left, I saw you in your van as you drove away, a plain white van, like something out of a true crime documentary or horror film. I think about him sometimes, and how if you would have caught me before I got to the supermarket on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, what horrors could have been waiting for me in the back of his van. Guy in overalls who followed me out of the pet store without putting down his basket. Even after 10 years, let's not ever meet again. This happened almost 10 years ago when I was 18. I wanted to go pick up some groceries at our local Walmart. It was around 11 at night and I just got off work. I usually have no problem going anywhere by myself, but on this night, my inner self was telling me to invite a friend to tag along. I am roughly 5 feet tall, female, 105 pounds, but I don't get spooked too easily and always carry pepper spray with me. Anyways, back to the story. I call my friend and ask if she'll accompany me, and I go to pick her up. We walk into the produce side of Walmart, and almost right away I notice this man staring at us very intently. He was around 5'5", kinda heavy, had a Hawaiian shirt on, and looked of Hawaiian descent. So we're over by the fresh produce, and I'm keeping an eye on him as he pretends to be looking at bread, but clearly keeps putting things back. I turn my back for a second to grab something. Then I hear a man's voice ask, "Hey, do you guys know of anywhere I can get food this late?" For more background information, I live in a city of about 50,000 people. Right across from this Walmart was Applebee's, which stays open rather late, a McDonald's a quarter mile up the road, and other various places to get food. Plus, we're in the middle of Walmart, duh. So I don't beat around the bush and flatly tell him that there's a couple restaurants around where we were. He then asked, "Well, what's fun to do around here?" It's late at night, so nothing really to do except maybe go to Applebee's or a local bar. I tell him Applebee's is open, and we have bars downtown, but that's all I'm aware of. He proceeds to ask what we were doing when we leave, and I tell him we have to leave now. He apologizes and said he didn't mean to be creepy. We walk away and are looking in the frozen aisle when I spot him on the opposite side walking by. I tell my friend I've had a bad feeling about him since we walked in and wanted to test out if he was following us. We walked a few aisles and sure enough, he was on the other end nonchalantly walking by, pretending not to see us. I backtrack a couple aisles to get something and he walks up, pretending to look at things. I finally ask him if I can help him with something. I think this threw him off guard by being so direct because he stutters and asks what aisle the milk is on or something. I tell him and we leave to check out. Well, wouldn't you know it, he's in the checkout right next to us with a pack of gum, no milk, or whatever else he was looking at. He finishes first and watches us leave the store. Me thinking he's gone by now, tells my friend, let's just run to the car. So we run out to the car, look around to make sure we didn't see him. Now, here's the real creepy part. As I'm leaving the parking lot, we see him sitting on the trunk of his car, watching people leave Walmart. I drove by to get his license plate number. He sees us and rushes into his car. I sped off as quickly as I could, so he can't see where I went. I then called the cops and tell them about what just happened, and relayed the license plate number to them. So creepy Hawaiian shirt guy, who was supposedly looking for places to eat while in the middle of Walmart, please let's never meet again. I was in Walmart earlier this evening with my two daughters, one elementary school aged and the other middle school. We looked around for school supplies for a minute and then rounded the corner to see the Halloween candy on display. As we turned the corner, a slightly older guy came really close to us, like he was in a hurry and almost hit our cart. He didn't have a cart or any items. I said, "Oh, excuse me," and then stopped in front of the candy to let my youngest ask a bunch of questions about the candy pumpkins. The man stopped quickly and started rummaging around the candies right next to my daughter. He was listening to our conversation and reacted strangely when my daughter said that she wanted to take a picture of the candy. He was twitchy and caught my eye and looked away quickly. We moved on to the women's PJ section to look around for a few minutes, and I noticed the same man pass by really close again. He was turning to the right towards the shoes with a big bag of candy cradled in his arms. My girls went across the aisle to the boys' clothing section while I finished deciding, and when I was catching up to them a couple minutes later, the guy was wandering through the boys' clothes towards my daughter. He paused and looked confused, but still like he was in a rush, and watched me discuss sizes with my youngest. This is when I started thinking something was off with this dude. I mentioned him to my older daughter, and then we moved through the partition into the girls' clothes. I didn't see him again for a few minutes, and figured it was nothing. But then he came into the section, and was acting like he was trying to pick out a Justice shirt. He still had the big bag of candy that he kept adjusting his grip on. I kept seeing him take quick peeks at my girls, but every time he saw me watching him, he pretended to be occupied in his shopping. I told my oldest I thought he was following us, and she said that she noticed the same thing. I made my youngest get in the cart so I could keep them both close. They both tend to wander a bit. The guy then walked out of the girls section, passing close behind me, but he looped around the partition back into the boys section and stopped at the opening on the other side, but still straight in the line of sight. He caught my eye again and twitched, then pulled out his phone, texted something, and walked away. By this time, I was on high alert and possibly quite paranoid. I looked around and saw two slightly older men standing around. One was in electronics, kind of looking at a half-empty display of something. But I swear he glanced at me several times, even though there were 3 or 4 racks of clothes and a hallway with occasional people in between. The third guy had wandered into the girls section and was apparently considering buying a Justice shirt too. Every time he saw me notice him watching us, he would wander down to the baby aisles, but keep coming back after a couple minutes. I realize now, looking back, that if I suspected something bad, I should have just gotten my girls out of there. Clothes shopping for a picky preteen isn't fun, and I wanted to get it done and over with. On top of that, I kept second guessing myself that the other two guys were just a coincidence. I kept my girls really close to me after we moved to the women's section, and I didn't see any of them again, and I stopped feeling creeped out, like we were being watched. Now, it's the middle of the night, and I'm pretty freaked out wondering what could have happened if I didn't notice the first guy and continue to let my girls wander around. Should I report anything? I can't really imagine anything would be done just because I noticed some guy watching my daughters in Walmart. So a couple days ago, I was headed into the grocery store and waited for a car to pass so I could cross. While he was driving very slowly, I saw he had a digital camera in his hand and he snapped a picture of me. The flash went off. The windows were down and everything, like he's fully prepared to do this, and he's probably done it many times before. I very audibly said, "What the fuck?" And by the time I realized what had just happened, he had driven away. It sufficiently freaked me out to the point where I asked all my female friends if they've ever experienced anything like that before. Of course, all of them had a different but equally creepy encounter with a man, because why wouldn't they? I feel like a lot of women are constantly put into uncomfortable situations because a lot of men just can't act like women are actual human beings. I'll be staying away from that store for a while. Maybe not creepy, I don't know. I'm a 23-year-old female. A few years ago when I was 18, I was going grocery shopping. As I was walking down the aisles, I noticed this older guy, maybe in his late 50s, early 60s, who seemed to be following me. Every aisle I went down, he was at the other end staring at me. I'm a bit paranoid because I'm 5'3" and 95 pounds, and know that I would have a hard time fighting someone off if I needed to. I kept my eye on him, and when I went to check out, he was right behind me. I stupidly at the time didn't ask someone to walk me out to my car because I carry tons of self-defense stuff like pepper spray, screamers, window breakers, and seatbelt cutters. I was meek and didn't want to bother the busy workers. I booked it to my car and saw him following me. I locked my doors and sped out of the parking lot. I'm thankful I checked my back mirrors because he was still following me. At this point, I kept circling the same block over and over. After like 5 minutes of doing this, he finally got the point that I was onto him and would keep circling the blocks until he stopped. He drove away. I circled a few more times and then just drove to my friend's house because I was scared that he was still out there and would find out where I lived. What's also scary is a similar thing happened the next time I was shopping. It wasn't the same guy, but it was still just unnerving. I told my mom and she gave me the rules of having someone walk me to my car, and if someone's following me, to pull into a police station. I usually don't bother to post anything on Reddit, but I figured typing out this situation might make me feel better. So I am 23 years old, female, and live on my own. I just moved out to this area for school and went to my local Walmart to gather supplies for cleaning. As I walked in, I take note of an older man near the entrance that I briefly made eye contact with and nodded at, and just kept walking. I was looking at folders for a bit and then made my way back towards the electronics section at the back of the store to look for a charger. I was making my way through the aisles on the way down, looking at the fall decorations. Lots of them were geared towards kids, so I just glanced at them quickly and turned around to leave. The same man was there and was holding and inspecting some paper plates with childish Halloween designs on them for kids. I didn't even hear him walk into the aisle. I thought that was a little strange but brushed it off, thinking he had grandkids. I left and made my way into the electronics section, where they kept the chargers behind locked glass doors. I'm there for about 7 minutes, and the same man shows up, and I see the reflection of him in the glass that he's checking out my ass as he walks by. At this point, I was pretty far away from where I last saw him. I brushed it off because I'm used to men making quick glances like that in public, and left it at that. He was looking at the display behind me, at the other side. Goes and leaves, and then this is where it gets creepy. He stands right behind me and starts aggressively eyeing me up and down while licking his lips, paying particular attention to my backside and my legs. He's basically undressing me with his eyes. At that point, he was giving off massive creep vibes, and I started shaking with adrenaline. I was alone in the aisle with him. I was afraid that he would try to grab me. I stayed calm, despite my throat feeling like it had a ball in it, and waited for him to leave. He does. Then I go down a random aisle near the electronics, but in the general part of the store, and waited there for a few minutes standing there to see if he would show up. I noticed that there were 2 men behind the electronics counter and wanted to stay near them if anything went wrong. I wanted to confirm if he was following me or not. Sure enough, 5 minutes later there he was. I caught him quite literally speed walking down the main walkway, looking down each aisle as if frantically looking for me. He stops dead, saw me notice him, and then promptly scurried off. I went back into the electronics section and informed them that I was being followed and was not comfortable, and asked if there was security. They didn't have any, just theft prevention, and offered to check me out there or accompany me to finish shopping. They were very kind, and I took them up on their offer to get my cleaning supplies nearby. As we turned together, the same guy was standing further away staring. He literally just increased the radius he was using to follow me and watching me from the front of the registers now. I get my stuff, check out, and then weave all through the clothing section to leave at a different section than the one I originally entered from and originally saw him. I didn't see him the whole time I did this. Got to my car. I promptly drove to my new place, but stopped halfway in a random neighborhood. I pulled over and pretended that it was my house to see if anyone was following me. I did not want this guy finding out where I lived. I drove home when I didn't see anyone. I may be overreacting, but this is a new area to me, and I've never had someone be quite that creepy and persistent in following me. I've done things on my own plenty of times and never had an issue. This all happened in the middle of the day at like 3 p.m. I was wearing loose clothes and just wanted to make a quick trip in and out. I have no idea what could have happened if I didn't notice, or what his intentions might have been. I can't imagine that they were good. Maybe he would have followed me to my new place. Who knows? Either way, this whole encounter was scary. He had no clue I saw his reflection and the nasty expression on his face. Just stay aware, guys, and watch yourself. Two years ago, I lived near a big city while taking care of my great-grandma. One day, me and my mom decided to get some groceries, but we did not have a car, so we had to walk. We were almost there when I heard my first name being shouted. I ignored it at first, thinking I was hearing things. But then this random lady that looked pretty disheveled and scared ran up to me, grabbing my arm, and kept repeating my name. My name is not a common name, and everyone I know calls me by a completely unrelated name, so there's no way that she overheard someone else saying it. She looked so frightened, and I'll never be able to get her face out of my mind. She was holding onto my arms with a really tight grip, and I remember being surprised because she was very skinny and frail looking. Her grip left bruises on my arms for a while. My mom ended up grabbing my arm and dragging me away. She was freaked out too, but didn't say anything. She just kept praying. When I got home, she prayed a lot and blessed me. I was not scared of the lady, just more confused. How did she know my name? Why did she look so scared?